If you're enjoying this video, smash that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell. Share it with your friends and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Every like and subscribe helps the channel grow. The radio crackled with static as I adjusted my gloves. Another day, another patrol. Ranger Hargrove, you copy? Storm's coming in faster than expected. You might want to head back early. I pressed the button on my radio. Copy that, dispatch. Just finishing my route. My breath clouded in front of my face as I trudged through the snow. Shoshone was beautiful in winter, but deadly too. 3 hikers had ignored the winter closure signs and were now missing. Fools. The mountains don't forgive mistakes. I stopped suddenly. Something was off. The tracks in the snow ahead of me weren't from deer or elk. They were wrong, too wide, with strange spacing. They just appeared out of nowhere, like whatever made them had dropped from the sky. And then, 50 feet later, they vanished. What the hell? I muttered, kneeling down to look closer. The wind picked up, blowing snow into my face. The storm was coming in fast. I marked the location on my map and kept moving. An hour later, I found their tent. Everything was still inside. Sleeping bags, backpacks, a small camp stove. No signs of a struggle, but nobody leaves their gear behind in these temperatures. Not if they want to live. That's when I saw the blood. Not much, just small drops leading away from the tent. I followed them, my hand resting on my gun. The trail split into 3 different directions, each one eventually disappearing as if the person had just vanished. The wind was howling now, snow swirling around me so thick I could barely see. 10 feet ahead, my radio buzzed with static, but no voice came through. I was on my own. Damn it, I cursed, turning back toward my cabin. I'd have to continue the search tomorrow. As I trudged through the deepening snow, something cold that wasn't snow touched the back of my neck. I spun around, drawing my gun. Nothing there, just the endless white of the forest. But I could have sworn I heard someone whisper my name. The time I reached my cabin, the blizzard was in full force. I locked the door, stoked the fire, and took out my silver flask. Claire's picture smiled at me from inside the lid. 2 years gone, and I still talk to her every night. Strange day, Claire, I said, taking a sip of whiskey. Something's not right in these woods. Outside, the wind screamed like a wounded animal, and I tried not to think about those tracks that began and ended in the middle of nowhere, or the blood trails that vanished into thin air. Sleep didn't come easy that night. It never did. But this time it wasn't just the memories of Korea that kept me awake. It was the feeling that something was watching my cabin, waiting in the storm. And somewhere in the howling wind, I could have sworn I heard laughter. I woke to silence. The storm had passed, leaving behind a world of white. The morning sun reflected off the snow, making me squint as I looked out my window. That's when I noticed the ice patterns. They weren't the usual frost you'd expect. These were perfect, like someone had drawn them with careful hands. Symmetrical shapes that looked almost like faces if you stared too long. Weird, I muttered, touching the glass. The ice was on the outside, not the inside where condensation would form. After a quick breakfast, I geared up for search and rescue. The snow was deep, at least 4 feet of fresh powder on top of what was already there. Radio was working again, but barely. Dispatch, this is Hargrove. Any word on those missing hikers? Nothing yet, Wes. Search team can't get up there till they clear the roads. You're still on your own. Great. Just great. I took my rifle, extra supplies, and headed out. The forest was dead quiet. No birds, no squirrels, nothing. Even the wind had stopped. Just the crunch of my boots in the snow. I don't get spooked easy after what I saw in Korea, but something felt off. I followed my map back to where I'd found the tent yesterday. From there, I picked one of the blood trails and followed it deeper into the trees. The path led me to a clearing I knew well, popular camping spot in summer. That's where I found the first body. I've seen dead men before. Too many. But this was different. The man was lying face up in the snow, perfectly arranged like he was just taking a nap, except his skin was gone, all of it, like someone had peeled him like an apple, one clean piece. His face was frozen. In terror, bloodless muscles exposed to the air, but no blood around him, none, and no animal had touched the body. My hands shook as I took out my Polaroid camera. I needed evidence. No one would believe this without pictures. Click, whir. The camera spat out the photo. I shook it, watching the image appear slowly. It looked unreal, like something from a horror picture show. I checked the body for ID, careful, not to disturb anything. James Colton, age 27, from Idaho. I said a quick prayer for him, though I wasn't sure God was listening in these woods anymore. The sun was starting to set when I heard it, whispering, like several people talking just quietly enough that I couldn't make out the words. I spun around. Gun raised. Who's there? Forest Service. Identify yourself. Nothing but trees and snow. The whispering stopped. I called for my dog team on the radio, but when they arrived an hour later, the dogs wouldn't track. They whined and pulled back, tails between their legs. I'd never seen them act like that before. Come on, boys, I urged, but they just howled. A sad, scared sound that made the hair on my neck stand up. I marked the location and headed back to my cabin as darkness fell. The whole way back, I felt eyes on me, not animal eyes. Something else that night, I locked my door, checked my windows, and kept my rifle close. I didn't touch the whiskey. I needed to stay sharp. Something's hunting in my forest, Claire, I said to the picture in my flask. And I don't think it's anything I've ever seen before. I fell asleep to the sound of whispering coming from the walls. I jolted awake at the sound of knocking. My watch said 6:42 a.m. The sun was barely up. Who's there? I called, grabbing my gi. Rifle, Forest Service. It's Reed, Tim Reed from the South Station. I opened the door cautiously. Tim Reed stood there in standard ranger gear, looking cold but cheerful. Hargrove, good to see you, man. They sent me up to help with the search. I let him in, but something felt wrong. Tim was supposed to be running the station 200 miles south. Coffee, I offered, watching him closely. Love some, he said, taking off his gloves. He moved oddly as he sat down, like his joints weren't quite right, and his uniform was slightly too big, hanging off his frame. Storm hit you bad? He asked, looking around my cabin. Pretty bad. Found one of the missing hikers. Yesterday. Alive? He asked, his eyes too bright. Dead. Condition was unusual. Reed nodded, but didn't ask for details. Any normal ranger would have. So, I said casually, how's Susan doing? Reed smiled. She's great, thanks for asking. My hand tightened. On my coffee mug. Tim Reed wasn't married, never had been. Throughout the day, little things kept adding up. Reed didn't know standard radio codes. He asked questions about where other rangers were stationed. He stared at me when he thought I wasn't looking, but the worst part? When we went outside to check the generator, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The snow around my cabin had 2 sets of boot prints going in, mine and his. But only mine coming out. Reed left no footprints, none. I'm going to radio headquarters, I said casually when we got back inside. Let them know you arrived safely. Reed smiled. Good idea. I went to the radio room and closed the door. My hands were shaking as I turned the dial. Dispatch, this is Hargrove, over. Static then. Go ahead, Wes. Is Tim Reed on duty today? Over. A pause. Affirmative, he's covering South Station this week. Why? I felt sick, just checking schedules, over and out. Whoever, whatever, was in my living room, it wasn't Tim Reed. I came back out trying to act normal. All good. They're glad you made it. Not Reed nodded. Any chance we could check those photos you took of the body? I nodded. They're in my pack. I'll get them after dinner. That night, I pretended to turn in early. Take the couch, I told him. I'll set up a proper bed tomorrow. Thanks, Wes, he said, smiling a little too wide. I went to my room, left the light on, and placed my hat. on the pillow to look like a head. Then I slipped out the window and circled around to peek through the living room window. What I saw will haunt me forever. Reed was standing in the middle of the room, his neck stretched impossibly long as he examined his own face. His fingers pulled at his skin, stretching it like rubber. Then he turned toward my bedroom door, and I swear his jaw unhinged like a snake about to swallow something whole. I didn't wait to see more. I quietly made my way to the equipment shed, grabbed what I needed, and locked Reed inside the storage room. On my way back in, the lock wouldn't hold him long. I needed answers, and fast. The storage room was empty by morning, no sign of forced entry. The lock was still intact. Whatever was pretending to be Reed had simply vanished. I didn't waste time. I grabbed the station's old records and headed for the emergency backup location, an abandoned fire lookout tower about 5 miles deeper into the forest. If this thing was hunting me, I needed to understand what it was. The tower creaked in the wind as I climbed the icy steps. It hadn't been used in years, but it was solid and had a good view of the surrounding forest. More importantly, it had a small wood stove and enough supplies to last a few days. I barricaded the door and started digging through the dusty box of records. My hands trembled, not from the cold, but from fear. What I'd seen last night wasn't possible. People don't stretch their necks or unhinge their jaws, but I knew what I saw. Hours passed as I flipped through old reports, looking for anything unusual. Just when my eyes were getting tired, I found it. A leather-bound journal dated 1932. The handwriting was shaky, like the person who wrote it was scared or cold. February 18th, 1932. Third body found today. Same condition as others. Skin removed. Completely no blood at scene. Miller thinks it's a new kind of bear. I know better. I kept reading, my stomach tightening. February 20th, 1932. It's taken Dawson's face. Came into camp wearing his skin, but the eyes were wrong, all wrong. We shot it, but it just smiled and walked away. Page after page described the same creature I was facing now. The same pattern, missing hikers, skinned bodies, a thing that could look like people, but wasn't quite right. Then I found a report from 1904, similar incidents, same location, and another from 1963. Every 30 years or so, like clockwork, tucked in the back of the journal was a yellowed paper with strange symbols and writing I didn't recognize. At the top, someone had scribbled a translation. Warnings about the cold. One who wears men. The native tribes had known about this thing for generations. I kept reading until I found a photograph that made my blood freeze. A group of rangers from 1932, standing in front of this very lookout tower, 5 men all smiling. And there on the end was Tim Reed's face, exactly the same, not aged a day. This thing had been here before. It had worn that face before. A noise outside made me jump. Something was circling the tower, dragging what sounded like claws against the wooden supports. "I know you're in there, Wesley," called Reed's voice, but it was different now, like multiple voices speaking together. "Don't. You want to see Claire again? I can look like her for you. I can be her." I covered my ears, fighting back tears. Using Claire against me was low, even for a monster. "Leave me alone," I shouted. The thing laughed, a hollow sound that echoed through the trees. "You can't stay in there forever, Ranger. And I'm very, very patient." As night fell, I huddled near the small stove, journal clutched in my hands. The creature continued circling, sometimes speaking with Reed's voice, sometimes with voices I didn't recognize. Once, terribly, with Claire's. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I just kept reading, looking for a way to kill this thing. And outside, in the dark forest, it waited. Dawn broke cold and clear. The thing that wasn't Reed had disappeared sometime during the night, but I knew it would be back. I turned back to the journal, desperate for answers. The middle section was water damaged, but I could still make out most of the writing. The ranger from 1932, Henry Blackwood was his name, had figured out some things about the creature. It collects faces, he wrote, keeps them in a den underground. Not just the skin, the actual faces, preserved somehow. It wears them like masks, becoming the person completely. I shuddered, thinking of Reed's too wide smile. More terrifying still, the journal continued. It doesn't just take their appearance, it takes their memories too. Can answer questions only the real person would know, but there are ways to spot it. I leaned closer, hanging on every word. It can't cross running water. The cold hurts it. Real cold, like ice water. Silver burns. Its skin. And it can't hold human shape during moonrise. That's when it's vulnerable. Silver. I touched the flask in my pocket, the one with Claire's picture. It was pure silver, a wedding gift from her parents. The next pages detailed Blackwood's desperate attempt to kill the creature. He'd melted down silver candlesticks into bullet casings. Smart man. I looked around the tower. There wasn't much, but there was an old metal pot and some tools. I could melt down my flask, make silver bullets of my own. The thought of destroying. Claire's picture made my chest hurt, but I needed every advantage I could get. As I worked, melting the silver over the small stove, I kept reading. Blackwood had tracked the creature to its den, but never returned to tell what he found. His last entry simply read, "God forgive me for what I must do tomorrow." Near the back of the journal, I found a photo I hadn't noticed before. It showed a tree, massive, ancient, with roots that seemed to claw at the ground. Something about it seemed wrong, unnatural. On the back, Blackwood had written, "The eating tree, where it sleeps, where it was born." I knew that tree. It was in the oldest part of the forest near the frozen lake. About 3 miles from here. By noon, I had 6 silver bullets cooling in makeshift molds. Not many, but they would have to do. I loaded my revolver carefully, saying a silent apology to Claire as I tucked her now empty flask back into my pocket. The radio I'd brought crackled suddenly, making me jump. "Hargrove, you there? We've got a rescue team heading your way. ETA tomorrow morning." My heart sank. More people meant more potential victims. Negative dispatch. Do not send anyone. Repeat. Do not send anyone. Situation is hazardous. Static answered me. I tried again, but the connection was gone. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying a strange sweet smell, like pine sap, but stronger, sicklier. I'd smelled it before, right before finding the skinned body. It was coming. I gathered my supplies, the silver bullets, a knife, matches, and the journal. The lookout tower wouldn't protect me forever. I needed to find this thing's den, understand how to kill it permanently. As I reached for the door, I heard it. Soft footsteps on the stairs outside. Then Claire's voice. Perfect and heartbreaking. "Wes? Baby, it's cold out here. Let me in." I bit my lip until I tasted blood, forcing myself not to answer, not to hope. "Wesley, please." Her voice cracked. "I'm scared." I pressed my forehead against the door, tears freezing on my cheeks. "You're not her," I whispered. "You'll never be her." The voice changed, becoming something inhuman, a hissing, multi-toned sound that raised the hair on my arms. "Then I'll wear your skin instead, Ranger. I'll be you." I waited until the footsteps retreated, then slipped out, heading toward the ancient tree and whatever horror waited for me there. The forest seemed to close in around me as I made my way toward the ancient tree. Every shadow looked like Reed. Every rustle in the bushes made me spin around, gun drawn. I was jumping at nothing, or maybe not nothing. Setting traps was something I learned in Korea. The basics were simple. Tripwires, noisemakers, things to slow down your enemy. I worked quickly, circling the lookout tower with trip lines made from fishing wire. At key points, I sprinkled the silver shavings from my filing work. If the journal was right, the creature wouldn't be able to cross it. The kerosene I'd found in the tower went into small pools near each trap. One spark, and they'd go up like the 4th of July. By sunset, I had a decent perimeter. Not perfect, but better than nothing. I climbed back into the tower, my breath clouding in the cold air. The temperature was dropping fast, had to be near 0 now. That's when the psychological games began. Wesley. Claire's voice again, but this time from multiple directions like she was circling the tower. Why did you let me die alone, Wesley? I called for you. I covered my ears, but her voice seemed to come from inside my head. You weren't there when I needed you most. Stop it, I whispered. You're not her. A laugh, Reed's laugh now, echoed through the trees. I can be anyone, Ranger. Everyone who died alone in these woods. Everyone you failed to save. Movement caught my eye. Reed was walking between the trees. No, not just one Reed. 3 of him circling my tower, just beyond my traps. Identical copies, moving in perfect synchronization. I raised my rifle, trying to steady my shaking hands. Which one was real? Were any of them real? Come out, Wesley, they called in unison. It's so cold out here, so very cold. I fired at the nearest one. The bullet passed through it like it was made of smoke. An illusion. The second Reed smiled and kept walking. The third one stepped on a tripwire. The kerosene ignited with a whoosh, engulfing the figure in flames. It didn't scream, it didn't burn. It just stood there, Reed's face melting away to reveal nothing underneath. Just empty space where a face should be. I scrambled back from the window, heart hammering in my chest. This wasn't possible. None of this was possible. A movement in the trees caught my eye. Someone running, a flash of orange. A hunting jacket. Hello, a man's voice called. Is someone there? I heard a shot. A hiker. A real person. Stay back, I shouted. It's not safe. But he was already crossing my perimeter, moving toward the tower. I had to warn him. I raced down the stairs and out the door, gun ready. The hiker was about 50 yards away, waving his arms. Thank God, he called. I've been lost for... I fired. Before he could finish. Something in his eyes, a wrongness, a emptiness, gave him away. But as the man fell, I realized my mistake. Blood, real blood, spread across the snow. The wallet that fell from his pocket showed a Michigan driver's license. Robert Kinney, age 42. A real person. I'd just shot a real person. I ran to him, dropping to my knees. No, no, no. He was still breathing. The bullet had hit his shoulder. I could save him. I had to save him. As I bent to help him, I heard Reed's voice from right behind me. Careless, Ranger. Very careless. I spun around, but too late. Something hard hit the back of my head, and darkness swallowed me whole. When I woke, I was back. In the tower, the wounded hiker tied up across from me. It was fully dark now. How long had I been out? I'm sorry, I told him. I thought you were... something else. He stared at me, eyes wide with fear. What's happening? What's out there? Something that shouldn't exist, I said, working on the ropes binding my hands. The creature had been sloppy, overconfident. We need to leave, now. Outside I could hear Reed's voice, no, voices. Dozens of them, all talking at once, circling the tower like wolves, and among them Claire's voice calling my name. I got us both free and patched up Robert's shoulder with the first aid kit. The bullet had gone clean through, painful, but not life-threatening if we could get him to a doctor soon. Listen to me, I said, keeping my voice low. There's something out there, something dangerous. It can look like people, sound like people, but it's not human. Robert looked at me like I was crazy. Can't blame him, I'd shot him after all. We need to move, I continued. That thing is playing with us. When it gets bored, it'll come for us. What is it? Robert asked, voice shaking. I don't know, but I know where it lives. We slipped out the back of the tower during a lull in the voices. The moon was rising nearly full. One more night, and it would be at its brightest. If the journal was right, that's when the creature would be weakest. We moved quietly through the trees, following my map to the ancient tree Blackwood had photographed. Robert was struggling, but he kept up. The cold helped slow the bleeding. "What were you doing out here alone?" I whispered as we walked. "Hunting," he said. "Got turned around in the storm. Been trying to find my way out for days." The old tree loomed ahead of us, massive and twisted. Its branches reached up like bony fingers against the night sky. The roots spread out in all directions, some as thick as a man's body, creating strange humps and hollows in the ground. And there, between two giant roots, was a dark opening. A cave. "We are going in there?" Robert asked, eyes wide. "I am," I said. "You're staying here. If I'm not back in 20 minutes, head east. You'll hit the main road eventually." I handed him my compass and a flare. "If you see that thing, and you'll know it when you see it, use this. Fire scares it." Clutching my silver-loaded gun, I ducked into the opening. The smell hit me immediately. Sweet pine sap mixed with something rotten. The walls were damp, lined with a strange, clear substance that looked like tree sap, but moved slightly like it was breathing. My flashlight beam caught something ahead, a glint of metal. As I moved closer, I saw it was a watch. Next to it, a pair of glasses, then a wedding ring, dozens of personal items arranged carefully on a natural shelf of rock. Trophies. I moved deeper, the tunnel widening into a larger chamber. What I saw, there stopped me cold. Faces, dozens of them, preserved somehow in the clear sap that coated the walls. Men, women, some recent, some so old they were barely recognizable. All frozen in expressions of terror, and in the center of it all, something moved. I swung my flashlight toward the sound. A woman was huddled against the far wall, shaking with cold or fear or both. She looked up, shielding her eyes from my light. "Are you real?" she whispered. I approached carefully, gun ready. "I'm Ranger Hargrove. Who are you?" "Holly Martinez, wildlife photographer." She gestured to a broken camera nearby. "I was tracking Link's patterns when the storm hit, then I saw it. The creature," she nodded, her eyes haunted. "It killed my guide, took his face, wore it. It's been keeping me alive, feeding me. I think it's saving me for later." Helped her to her feet. She was thin but steady. "We need to leave," I said. "We can't," she replied. "It always knows when I try. It's connected to this place somehow, to that." She pointed to the center of the chamber. I hadn't noticed it before, a pulsing mass of clear sap about the size of a car. Something was inside. It's something I couldn't quite make out. "What is that?" "Its true form, I think. It's preparing." "For what?" "Rebirth," she said. "It happens during the full moon. It needs to shed all its stolen faces and return to its core form. That's when it's vulnerable." I stared at the pulsing mass. "Tomorrow night." She nodded. "But it needs a final sacrifice. Before then, I think that's why it's kept me alive." Suddenly, pieces clicked together in my mind. The 30-year cycle, the hibernation, the faces. It's been doing this for generations, I realized. Waking up, feeding, then going back to sleep. And no one's been able to stop it. "Until now," Holly said, a fierce light in her eyes. "I've been watching it, learning its patterns. It can't stand silver or fire. And during the full moon, when it returns to this chamber to rebirth itself, it's physically vulnerable." I looked at her with new respect. She'd been captured by this thing but hadn't given up. "We need a plan," I said. As we talked, a memory surfaced from Korea, a napalm strike I'd witnessed. The white-hot flame that consumed everything it touched. Nothing survived that heat. "I know how to kill it," I said. "But we need to trap it here." During the transformation, a noise from the tunnel entrance made us both freeze. Someone was coming. "Hide," I whispered, pushing her behind the pulsing sap mound. Robert appeared at the chamber entrance, his face pale in the flashlight beam. "Hargrove, you need to see this." But something was wrong. His voice had that same hollow quality I'd heard before, and his eyes, Empty, like looking into a well with no bottom. Not Robert, not anymore. I raised my gun. Where is he? What did you do to him? The thing wearing Robert's face smiled. He was delicious, so full of fear, just like you. I fired at the thing wearing Robert's face. The silver bullet hit it square in the chest. It screamed, a sound no human throat could make. Its skin bubbled and smoked where the silver entered, and it stumbled backward, losing Robert's shape for a moment. I caught a glimpse of something pale and writhing underneath before it fled back up the tunnel. It's gone, I said, lowering my gun. For now. Holly emerged from hiding, her face grim. It will be back with more faces. Then we need to be ready. I checked my gun. 4 silver bullets left. We made our way out of the cave, moving carefully in case the creature was waiting for us. The forest was quiet, too quiet. No birds, no insects, like everything living had fled. We need somewhere open, Holly said. Somewhere with lots of moonlight for tomorrow night. The frozen lake, I replied. 1/2 mile east. Nothing can sneak up on us there. We gathered what we could from the lookout tower. Kerosene, matches, my flare gun, rope, and the first aid kit. I also found an old ultraviolet lamp in the equipment locker. The journal had mentioned the creature didn't like bright light. It'll come for us, Holly said as we hiked toward the lake. It needs a final sacrifice before it can complete its rebirth. Let it come, I said, checking my silver bullets. We'll be ready. At the lake, we set our trap. We cleared the snow from the center, making a wide circle where the moonlight would be strongest. Around the edge, we poured kerosene in a ring, ready to light. We need bait, Holly said, her voice steady despite the fear I knew she must be feeling. I'll be the bait, I replied. It wants me anyway. Has since the beginning. She shook her head. We both know it's not that simple. It wants both of us now. As we worked, Holly told me more about herself. She was 3 months pregnant, her first child. She'd wanted to finish one last photography assignment before taking time off. I need to survive this, she said, hand on her belly. Not just for me anymore. The thought of her unborn child gave our mission a new urgency. This wasn't just about stopping a monster. It was about making sure that child had a future. By nightfall, our trap was set. The lake gleamed in the dying light, ice thick enough to hold us, but thin enough in some spots that we'd marked them. If the creature could truly be hurt by water, those weak spots might come in handy. Holly had the idea to use the creature's own tricks against it. We'd found my recorder in my pack and set it up to play recorded messages, calls for help in our voices to confuse it. Take this, I said, giving Holly my ranger hat, the one my father had given me years ago. Consider it a good luck charm. She tried to refuse, but I insisted. My dad always said it kept him safe in these woods. Maybe it'll work for you too. As darkness fell, we took positions on opposite sides of our trap. The moon was nearly full, casting bright silver light across the frozen lake. In less than 24 hours, we'd face the creature during its transformation. Our only chance to kill it for good. I checked my gun again, the silver bullets catching the moonlight. Not many, but they would have to be enough. If something happens to me, I said over the radio we'd set up between us, make sure you get out of here. Get to the main road. Don't look back. Nothing's going to happen to you, Holly replied, but we both knew that was a lie. The temperature dropped as the night wore on. My breath came in white clouds and my fingers grew numb despite my gloves. The trees around the lake seemed to lean in, watching us with patient malice, and somewhere in those dark woods, the creature was preparing too, gathering its strength, choosing which face to wear. I touched the empty silver flask in my pocket. I might be seeing you soon, Claire, I whispered. But not before I send this thing back to hell. The night grew deeper. We waited, and in the darkness, beyond our little circle of light, something began to move. The first light of dawn was just touching the trees when I heard the crunch of footsteps on snow. I tensed, raising my rifle. "Who's there?" I called, voice steady despite my racing heart. No answer, just more footsteps circling our position. Then I saw him, myself, walking out of the trees onto the frozen lake. It was like looking in a mirror. Every detail perfect. My ranger uniform, my walk, even the scar on my left cheek from a bar fight years ago. The only difference was the eyes, flat and empty, like a doll's. "Wesley," it said with my voice. "We don't have to do this." Holly's voice crackled over the radio. "Wes, I see you near the North Shore. Is that really you?" "Negative," I replied, keeping my gun trained on my double. "I'm still in position. What you're seeing isn't me." A second figure emerged from the trees near Holly's position, another copy of me. The creature was trying to confuse us. "Don't trust anything you see," I warned over the radio. "Stay put until moonrise." The day stretched on, a tense waiting game. The creature kept its distance, sometimes appearing as me, sometimes as Robert, sometimes as people I didn't recognize, always watching, always circling. As evening approached, clouds began to gather, threatening to block the moonlight we needed for our plan to work. "Weather's turning," Holly radioed. "If those clouds cover the moon—" "They won't," I said with more confidence than I felt. "Be ready to light the kerosene when I give the signal." The sun dipped below the horizon, plunging the forest into twilight. The temperature dropped sharply. My breath froze in the air as I checked my watch. 20 minutes until moonrise. A distant sound caught my attention, the whump-whump of helicopter blades. Rescue team, I realized with horror. They'd come despite my warning. The radio crackled. "Ranger Hargrove, this is search and rescue. Do you copy?" I grabbed the radio. "This is Hargrove. Do not land. Repeat, do not land. Situation is not secure." "We've got your location," the voice replied. "Setting down in the clearing by the lake." "No!" I shouted, but it was too late. The helicopter was approaching, its searchlight sweeping the trees. That's when it happened. As the first edge of the moon appeared over the mountains, a terrible scream split the air, inhuman, like metal tearing and animals dying all at once. My double at the lake's edge began to change. Its skin bubbled and stretched, features melting like wax, arms elongated, fingers extending into foot-long claws. Its jaw unhinged, opening impossibly wide to reveal rows of needle-like teeth. "Now!" I shouted into the radio. "Light it up!" Holly struck a flare, igniting the kerosene ring. Flames leapt up, surrounding the transforming creature in a circle of fire. The helicopter's searchlight found us, illuminating the horrific scene below. I could imagine their confusion, their terror at what they were witnessing. The half-transformed creature lunged toward the fire but recoiled from the heat. It was trapped, just as we'd planned. Its body continued to twist and change, shedding human features like a snake shedding its skin. Then everything went wrong. The helicopter dipped too low, disoriented by the bizarre scene below. Its rotor clipped a tall pine, sending it into a spin. It crashed at the edge of the lake, the impact cracking the ice in a spiderweb pattern. 2 rangers stumbled from the wreckage, dazed but alive. The creature saw them and moved with blinding speed, flowing across the ice like water despite the fire. I fired 2 silver bullets, hitting it squarely. It shrieked but didn't stop. It reached the first ranger, claws slashing. He went down without a sound, blood darkening the white snow. The second ranger fired his pistol, the bullets passing harmlessly through the creature's shifting form. It took him next, its body engulfing him completely before withdrawing, leaving nothing but empty clothes behind. "Run!" I shouted to Holly across the lake. "Get out of here!" But as she turned to flee, a massive fallen tree, dislodged by the helicopter, crash, slid down the bank and pinned her leg to the ice. I didn't think, I just moved, racing across the frozen lake toward her. The ice cracked beneath my feet, water seeping up through the fissures. Behind me, the creature howled, a sound of rage and hunger. The full moon now hung overhead, bathing everything in silver light. The transformation was accelerating. Its skin turned translucent, revealing faces beneath. Dozens of them, pressing against the surface like people trapped under ice, mouths open in silent screams. I reached Holly and heaved at the tree, muscles straining. It shifted just enough for her to pull free. "Go!" I gasped, pushing her toward the shore. "I'll hold it off." "Not without you," she insisted, gripping my arm. The creature was approaching, its form massive now, no longer even remotely human. It moved in a strange, fluid way, like it had too many bones, too many joints. I had 2 silver bullets left. I raised my gun, waiting for it to get closer. "Wesley," Holly whispered, "look." The ice beneath the creature was cracking, water bubbling up around its feet. It hissed in pain, trying to retreat, but the fire behind it blocked its path. I understood immediately. The thin ice. We need to get it into the water. We backed away slowly, leading it toward the center of the lake, where we'd marked the thinnest. Ace! It followed, its movements becoming more desperate as the moonlight intensified its transformation. 20 feet from shore, I stopped. "This is far enough. Get to land." Holly hesitated, then pressed something into my hand. My ranger hat. "Come back for this," she said, then turned and ran. I faced the creature alone, standing on ice that I knew wouldn't hold much longer. The thing before me barely resembled anything from this world now. Its true form was revealing itself. A writhing mass of translucent flesh with faces visible just beneath the surface, like living windows into its collection of souls. It reached for me with long, boneless limbs. I fired my last 2 silver bullets directly into its center mass. The creature screamed, its body convulsing. The ice cracked loudly beneath us both. Cold water rushed up around my feet, but I held my ground. As the creature thrashed, I pulled out my last weapon, a silver tent stake I'd filed to a point, made from the melted remains of my flask. "This is for Claire," I said, "and for everyone else you've taken." I lunged forward, driving the stake deep into the heart of the thing. It made a sound like nothing I'd ever heard before, a high, keening wail that seemed to come from everywhere. At once, the ice gave way completely, plunging us both into the freezing water. The cold hit me like a physical blow, driving the air from my lungs. The creature thrashed wildly, trying to escape the water that seemed to dissolve it like acid. I held on, pushing the stake deeper, even as the cold numbed my hands and the darkness pulled at the edges of my vision. The last thing I remember was Holly's voice, calling my name from very far away, and the light of the full moon shining down through the water, turning everything silver. I don't remember much after falling through the ice. Glimpses, maybe. Being dragged from the water, the burn of returning. Circulation, voices shouting orders, then darkness again. I woke up 3 days later in a hospital in Cody. My hands and feet were bandaged. Frostbite, the doctors said. I was lucky to keep all my fingers and toes, lucky to be alive at all. Holly was there when I opened my eyes. She looked tired but whole, my old ranger hat sitting on the chair beside her. "You made it," she said simply. "The creature." My voice was a raspy whisper. "Gone. The recovery team found something under the ice, not human. They took it away for study. No one's saying much about it." I closed my eyes, relief washing over me. Good. The official story became that we'd encountered a bear, a rare, aggressive specimen driven mad by disease. The skinned bodies were attributed to a human killer who died in the helicopter crash. Neater that way. Easier to file. Holly stayed until I was released from the hospital. She'd promised to document what happened. The truth, not the sanitized. A version someone needed to know in case it ever came back. "Do you think it's really dead?" she asked on her last day, standing in my hospital room doorway. I thought about the silver stake, the way the creature had dissolved in the water, the unearthly scream as the moonlight touched its true form. "I don't know," I admitted. "But if it isn't, we'll be ready next time." She nodded, hand resting on her belly. I'm naming him Wesley, if that's okay with you. I felt something warm in my chest. Not quite happiness, but close. I'd be honored. 6 months later, I received a package. Inside was a journal, Holly's account of everything that had happened, along with photographs, maps, and newspaper clippings. A letter explained she'd had her baby, a healthy boy. They were living in Montana now, far from Shoshone. I added the journal to the station's archives alongside Blackwood's from 1932. Just in case, the search team never found my silver flask in the lake, but they did find something strange, a piece of silver melted into a symbol I didn't recognize. I keep it on my desk as a reminder. I still work as a ranger, though not in Shoshone anymore. The dreams are less frequent now. Career has faded, replaced by other memories. Ice breaking, water rushing in, eyes watching me from beneath translucent skin. Sometimes I wake up thinking I hear whispers. On those nights, I check the windows for frost patterns and listen for footsteps that leave no prints in the snow. And every winter, I call Holly to check on her and little Wesley. He's 7 now, bright and curious. She says he loves the forest, isn't afraid of anything. Says he sometimes stands at the edge of the woods behind their house, listening, like he hears something calling him. Last time we spoke, she mentioned something that's been bothering me ever since. A small patch of strange, translucent skin on the boy's wrist. Probably nothing, she said. A birthmark, maybe. But I've requested a transfer back to Shoshone for next season, just to be sure. Just to be ready, because some things don't stay buried. Some echoes never fade. And in those ancient pines, something might still be waiting, watching, learning, remembering my face. The water shouldn't be this warm, not in October, not at Crater Lake. I stared at the temperature readings again, checking my equipment for the 3rd time. The numbers didn't lie. Ranger Okafor? A voice called from behind me. I turned to see Linda from the visitor center, her face concerned. There's someone here about a missing student, I nodded, popping a pill dry before following her. My back screamed with each step. A reminder of the accident that had taken my colleagues and left me with scars that went deeper than skin. The woman waiting for me had red-rimmed eyes. I'm Vanessa Mitchell, she said. My research partner, Andrew, hasn't come back. We were supposed to meet 6 hours ago. I took down the details mechanically. 24-year-old geology student, last seen taking samples near the North Shore. Dark blue jacket, black backpack with specialized equipment. We'll find him, I promised, though something in my gut said otherwise. After she left, I went back to the lake. The water was unusually still, like glass reflecting the darkening sky. But something caught my eye, a faint blue glow beneath the surface. I knelt down for a closer look. The algae shouldn't be glowing like that, and it definitely shouldn't be forming those perfect circular patterns. My radio crackled. Ranger Okafor, we found something. Near the west shore, half hidden in the rocks, was diving equipment. A tank, fins, and a waterproof camera, but no diver. I checked the camera's memory card back at the station. Most of the photos were what you'd expect. Underwater rock formations, plant life. But the last 3 images made my blood run cold. The first showed a strange light in the depths. The second, a blur of movement. The third, I couldn't explain it. A face, but not human. Too many eyes, too fluid. Like it was still moving when the picture was taken. That night, I dug through old temperature records. Every 40 years, almost to the day, Crater Lake experienced the same temperature anomaly, 1945, 1905. And now, I was washing my hands in the bathroom when I saw it. Just for a second, the water from the tap flowing up instead of down, defying gravity. I blinked and it was normal again. I told myself it was just the pain meds, or exhaustion or grief. But deep down, I knew something was very wrong with the water, and I was afraid Andrew Kim had found out exactly what it was. I didn't sleep well. Dreams of water filling my lungs kept me tossing and turning. By morning, my eyes felt like sandpaper. Vanessa was waiting at my office when I arrived. She looked worse than I felt. "Tell me about what you and Andrew were studying," I said, offering her coffee from my thermos. She wasn't much older than my son Bradley. "We found a cave system that shouldn't exist," she said, hands trembling around the cup. "The maps show solid rock, but our equipment detected large hollow spaces under the lake." She pulled out Andrew's notebook and flipped to a page with rough sketches. He was excited about these readings, said it was like the lake had its own heartbeat. I jotted down notes, trying to keep my hands steady. "Did he mention seeing anything unusual? Lights maybe? Strange patterns in the water?" Her eyes widened slightly. "How did you know?" My stomach dropped. "Just a hunch." After she left, I drove to the park archives. Dust tickled my nose as I pulled file boxes from 1945 and 1905. 3 people vanished in 45, 2 rangers and a photographer. In 1905, it was the entire research team of 5. Both times, witnesses reported seeing strange lights in the water before the disappearances. I checked my watch as I walked back to my truck. 2:15 p.m., but when I arrived at the station, the clock read 2:35, 20 minutes gone, like they never happened. That night, I set up a night vision camera pointing at the lake. I didn't tell anyone. They'd think I was crazy. Maybe I was. I watched the footage the next morning. For hours, nothing but gentle waves. Then, at 3:17 a.m., pinpricks of light moved beneath the surface. Not random, they formed a pattern like a constellation. They pulsed 3 times before fading away. I replayed it again and again. Each time, my back pain seemed to throb in time with those lights. Pulse, pulse, pulse. Whatever was happening in Crater Lake was getting worse, and I couldn't shake the feeling that it knew I was watching. The Klamath Falls Historical Society was housed in an old brick building that smelled like old books and coffee. The man behind the desk looked almost as ancient as the artifacts around. "Him Dr. Wilson?" I asked. He smiled, deep wrinkles forming around kind eyes. "Ranger Okafor, I've been expecting you." I frowned. "How did you—" "The lake has a pattern," he said, laying out faded photographs on the desk. "I've been studying it my whole life." The photos showed Crater Lake from 1905. Men in old-fashioned clothes gathered around equipment. But what caught my eye was the water behind them. It had the same strange glow I'd seen 2 days ago. The local tribes called it the Hungry One Below, Dr. Wilson said quietly. They never fished in the lake. Said it wasn't a fish that would get you, but something else. Something that would eat your dreams first, then your body. A chill ran down my spine despite the warm room. "I need everything you have," I said. "Please." I spent hours there reading old reports, newspaper clippings about disappearances. My head pounded, but I couldn't stop. On my way back to the station, I pulled over to get some fresh air. As I sipped from my water bottle, something warm trickled down my face. I touched my upper lip. My fingers came away red. A nosebleed. At the lab, I examined the latest sediment samples from the lake. Something white caught my eye. Small, round objects about the size of marbles. They looked like eggs, but calcified, turned to stone over time. I counted 7 of them. When I touched one, it felt warm. It shouldn't have been warm. That night, I woke up thirsty. Half asleep, I stumbled to the bathroom and turned on the faucet. Just as I was about to drink, I heard it, a whisper coming from the drain. Words I couldn't make out, but definitely a voice. I jumped back, fully awake now. The water ran normally, no sounds, but I couldn't bring myself to drink it. Instead, I sat on the bathroom floor until morning, watching the drain, listening for whispers that didn't come again. Something was in the water, something that knew my name. Dr. Lydia Reeves didn't look like I expected. With her purple-streaked hair and hiking boots, she seemed more like a college student than a top marine biologist. But her eyes were sharp, missing nothing as I showed her the lab. "These readings are impossible," she said, looking at my temperature. "Data. Water doesn't behave this way naturally." "Tell that to the lake," I replied, handing her the calcified eggs I'd found. She turned them over carefully. "I've never seen anything like these. We should run some tests." As she set up her equipment, my phone rang. The caller ID made my heart skip. Bradley, my son. We hadn't spoken in weeks. "Dad?" His voice sounded thin through the phone. "I'm at the bus station. Mom said it was okay if I stayed with you this weekend." My mouth went dry. "You're here now?" "Surprise," he said, trying to sound casual, but I could hear the worry. "Is that not okay?" 20 minutes later, I was helping Bradley put his bag in my spare room. He'd grown taller since summer, his face losing some of its roundness. At 15, he looked more like his mother every day. "Place looks the same," he said, glancing around my small ranger cabin. "Not much changes out here," I lied. "We ate pizza for dinner while Dr. Reeves worked in the lab." I tried to focus on Bradley's stories about school, but my mind kept drifting to the lake, to the missing student, to the whispers from my drain. "Dad!" Bradley's voice snapped me back. "You're doing it again." "Doing what?" "Zoning out. Mom says, you do that when your back hurts. Are you taking your pills?" I forced a smile. "I'm fine, just work stuff." Later that night, Dr. Reeves called. Her voice was tight with excitement or fear, maybe both. "Marcus, I found something in the water samples. There are microorganisms I've never seen before. They're affecting the brain chemistry of the fish I tested, and the sonar results." She paused. "There's something big down there, really big, and it's moving." After we hung up, I found an old journal in the station archives from 1945. The ranger who wrote it described hearing voices from the water, seeing impossible things. His last entry, dated 3 days before he disappeared. "It's showing me things, wonderful, terrible things. I think it wants me to come home." That night, I dreamed I was swimming in the deepest part of the lake. But it wasn't my body. My limbs were long and pale, my skin translucent, and I wasn't alone. Something vast moved beside me, with countless eyes that saw everything. I woke up gasping, sheets soaked with sweat. Outside my window, the lake gleamed, under the moonlight, perfectly still, despite the wind in the trees, waiting. "Stay inside today," I told Bradley at breakfast. "There's a lot of work happening around the lake." He looked up from his cereal. "Is this about the missing guy? I heard people talking at the visitor center yesterday. I hadn't realized he'd gone there." "Yes, and it might be dangerous." "Can I help?" His eyes lit up with the same excitement he used to get as a kid when I'd let him wear my ranger hat. "The best help would be staying safe." I ruffled his hair, though he was almost too tall for that now. After making sure Bradley had enough movies and snacks, I met Dr. Reeves at the dock. Our small research boat was loaded with equipment for deep water samples. "The patterns are perfect spheres," she explained, as we headed to the center of the lake. "The temperature changes in perfect circles, like ripples in reverse." The water was unusually calm, our boat barely making a wake. The sky reflected on the surface made it look like we were floating in the clouds. "Stop here," Dr. Reeves said, checking her equipment. "This is the deepest point." We lowered the sampling tubes. Everything worked fine until they hit 900 feet. Then the screens went crazy with readings before going black. At the same moment, the boat engine sputtered and died. "That's not possible," Dr. Reeves whispered, trying to restart it. The battery was full. We drifted in silence. My skin prickled despite the warm sun. "Look!" Dr. Reeves pointed to something in the water about 50 yards away. A body face down, blue jacket, black hair, Andrew Kim. I grabbed the oars, rowing frantically toward him, but when we got there, nothing. just empty water. I saw him, Dr. Reeves insisted. We both did. A thick fog rolled in suddenly, though there had been clear skies moments before. I couldn't see the shore anymore, couldn't tell which direction to row. Stay close, I told Dr. Reeves, but when I turned around, she wasn't there. Lydia! I shouted, my voice swallowed by the fog. I rowed blindly, calling her name until my throat hurt. Then, just as suddenly as it appeared, the fog lifted. I was only yards from the shore. Dr. Reeves stood on the dock, waving frantically. Marcus, where have you been? Her voice was shaking. What are you talking about? I got lost in the fog for a few minutes. She stared at me. You've been gone for 3 hours. I made it back to shore and called for help. We've had search boats out looking for you. I checked my watch. She was right. 3 hours, gone in what felt like minutes. As I climbed onto the dock on shaky legs, I noticed something clutched in my hand that I didn't remember picking up. A small black notebook, its pages warped with water. Andrew Kim's research journal. I didn't remember finding it. I didn't remember anything from those missing hours. But something did. The shower didn't help. No matter how hot I made the water, I couldn't shake the bone-deep chill that had settled in me since returning to shore. As I dried my hands, something caught my eye, a thin webbing between my fingers like a frog's. I blinked hard, and it was gone. When I walked into the kitchen, Bradley was making sandwiches. You okay, Dad? You look awful. I tried to smile. Just tired. Your eyes look weird. He leaned closer. Your pupils are huge. I turned away, pouring coffee I didn't want. Bad lighting. Dr. Reeves arrived an hour later with Andrew's journal. We spread the damp pages on my kitchen table, trying to make sense of his notes. Look at these drawings, she said, pointing to sketches of what looked like cave systems beneath the lake. And here, he writes about hearing singing underwater. Bradley peered over our shoulders. What's that page? He pointed to something I hadn't noticed, a corner of paper sticking out from the journal's binding. It was a photo. Andrew and another student standing by the lake, but behind them in the water, a face, not human, too smooth, with eyes that seemed to swirl rather than focus. My coffee cup slipped from my hand, smashing on the floor. Nobody moved to clean. It up. We need to warn people, Dr. Reeves whispered. I walked to the window. Outside, thin streams of water were flowing uphill from the lake toward my cabin. They moved like snakes, purposeful. Dad? Bradley's voice sounded far away. Look at the trees. All around the lake, trees had strange symbols carved into their trunks. They hadn't been there yesterday. I was sure of it. Those are warning signs. I realized suddenly. Someone's tried to warn people before. My radio crackled. Ranger Okafor. Vanessa Mitchell hasn't checked in. Her tent is empty. After making Bradley promise to stay inside, Dr. Reeves and I drove to where Vanessa had set up monitoring equipment. Her tent was there, neatly zipped, laptop still running, coffee still warm in a thermos, but near the shoreline we found her notebook, pages flipping in the wind. The last entry, it's showing me where to go. It's so beautiful down there. Back. At the lab, Dr. Reeves looked through her microscope, face pale. The microorganisms in the lake water are changing. They're affecting DNA, human DNA. Anyone who's had enough contact with the water. She looked up at me. It could change them. I thought about the webbing I'd imagined between my fingers. The dreams of swimming with a body that wasn't mine. When I got home, Bradley was standing by the lake, staring into the water. Bradley! I ran to him, grabbing his shoulders. His eyes, when he turned to me, were distant, dreamy. The faces in the water, he said softly. They're singing, Dad. Can't you hear them? I didn't sleep. How could I? Bradley finally drifted off around 3 a.m., but I sat by his bed all night, watching his chest rise and fall, making sure he was still my son. At sunrise, Dr. Wilson arrived at my door, looking like he hadn't slept either. You found the carvings on the trees, he said. Not a question. You knew about them? He nodded, glancing at Bradley's closed door. I need to show you something, but not here. We drove in silence to a small cabin hidden in the woods. Inside was a lifetime of research, maps, photos, journals stacked to the ceiling. I lied to you, he said, pouring coffee with shaking hands. I wasn't just studying the lake. I was there in 1945. My head spun. That's impossible. You'd be 97, he finished. Yes. I was a young researcher then. There were 4 of us. I'm the only one who made it back. He pulled out a faded photo. 3 young men and a woman, smiling by the lake. One of them, with the same kind eyes, was unmistakably a younger Dr. Wilson. What happened to them, I asked, though part of me already knew. It took them one by one. His eyes grew distant. Not their bodies, not at first. Their minds. It feeds on consciousness, on awareness. The more you know about it, the more it knows about you. What is it? Something ancient, something that was here long before humans. He sighed. The Native Americans knew to stay away. We didn't listen. My radio crackled, making us both jump. Dr. Reeves, her voice tight with panic. Marcus, Bradley's here at the lab. He says you sent him to help me, but I was already running to my truck. I didn't send him anywhere. Keep him there. By the time I reached the lab, Bradley was missing. Again, Dr. Reeves looked terrified. He just walked out. His eyes were wrong. We found him at the shore, ankle deep in water, staring out at nothing. When I called his name, he didn't respond. I waded in, ignoring the water soaking my boots, and grabbed his arm. His skin was ice cold. Bradley, snap out of it. His eyes finally focused on me, confusion spreading across his face. Dad, why am I... He looked down at the water in horror. Back at the cabin, Dr. Reeves ran tests on both of us, while Dr. Wilson explained more about the creature. It can control anyone who's consumed enough lake water, he said. That's why I only drink bottled. You water here. Never shower when it's active. My dive training, I realized suddenly. In the Navy, we learned to resist nitrogen narcosis, the confusion that happens at depth. That's why I can still think clearly even after contact. Dr. Reeves looked up from her equipment. The creature has a biological component, but it's unlike any deep-sea species I've ever studied. Its cells can survive pressures that would crush normal life. How do we stop it? I asked. Dr. Wilson's face was grim. We don't. The best we can do is force it back into hibernation until the next cycle, and pray our grandchildren are better prepared than we were. As the sun set, we heard a noise outside. Vanessa stood there, but something was terribly wrong. Her movements were too fluid, her smile too wide. We came to invite you down, she said, her voice somehow echoing, though she spoke softly. The water is perfect now. Everyone should come home. We locked the doors and closed the blinds, but I could still feel Vanessa outside waiting. She didn't pound on the door or try to break in. That would have been easier to handle. Instead, she just stood there, humming softly, occasionally calling our names in a sing-song voice. She's not Vanessa anymore, Dr. Wilson whispered. Not entirely. I peeked through the blinds. She was gone, but that didn't make me feel better. We need a plan, I said, turning to face them. My son's frightened eyes made my chest ache. Dr. Wilson, you said it goes back into hibernation. How? He shuffled through his papers. Temperature changes trigger it. When the water warms, it wakes. When it cools rapidly, it sleeps. Can we cool the entire lake? Dr. Reeves asked, doubtful. No, I admitted, but maybe we don't have to. An idea was forming, something from my Navy days. Sound travels differently underwater. Certain frequencies can travel for miles, affect pressure. Dr. Reeves caught on quickly. Like how whales communicate across oceans. If we could generate the right frequency, it might drive it back to its dormant state. Dr. Wilson nodded slowly. Yes, that could work. We spent the night gathering equipment. I dug out my old dive gear, while Dr. Reeves modified underwater speakers with help from Bradley, who seemed calmer with a task to focus on. Dr. Wilson mapped out the deepest parts of the lake where the creature likely made its home. My back screamed with pain as I lifted tanks and equipment, but I didn't reach for my pills. I needed my mind clear. Dad, Bradley's voice was small as he helped me check my regulator. What if it doesn't work? I looked at my son, seeing for the first time how much courage it took for him to be here, helping when he must have been terrified. It will, I said with more confidence than I felt. And if it doesn't, we'll try something else. That's what Okafors do. A small smile. That's what you always say, because it's always true. As dawn broke, we tested the underwater speakers. They emitted a low, pulsing sound that made my teeth ache even above water. The frequency should disrupt its neural patterns, Dr. Reeves explained. But someone needs to place the speakers deep enough. We all knew what that meant. I would have to dive into the heart of the creature's domain. We were loading the truck when we noticed the water. All around the ranger station, puddles were forming. Not from rain. The sky was clear. The water was seeping up from the ground surrounding us, and in every puddle, no matter how small, I could see that same face reflected. The one from Andrews. Photo, the one with too many eyes. It knows, Dr. Wilson said quietly. It knows what we're planning. That's when we noticed the tap water had turned black in all the sinks. The pipes creaked and groaned throughout the building, the entire water system, I realized. It's in the pipes, the groundwater. It's everywhere. As if confirming my fears, every faucet in the building turned on at once, black water gushing out. We grabbed what we could and ran for the truck, water soaking our feet as we splashed through. The growing puddles. Through every droplet, I felt it watching us, watching me. The lake was perfectly calm when we arrived. Too calm, not a ripple or a wave, just a giant mirror reflecting the cloudy sky. It didn't look like water anymore, more like glass or ice, though I knew it wasn't frozen. It's waiting for you, Dr. Wilson said softly. I finished checking my dive gear, the familiar routine steadying my shaking hands. The plan was simple but dangerous. I would take 3 sonic devices to the deepest part of the lake, activate them, and get out before the creature could react. Bradley helped me with my tanks. His hands were steady even though his eyes were scared. "You're coming back, right?" he asked, voice cracking a little. "Always," I promised, though my stomach twisted with the possibility of breaking that promise. Dr. Reeves handed me the modified devices, each about the size of a coffee can. They're set to the frequency we discussed. Once placed, you'll have exactly 3 minutes to get clear before they activate. I nodded, slipping them into my dive bag. "Marcus," Dr. Wilson gripped my shoulder, "if you feel your mind slipping, focus on something personal, a memory, something it can't touch." I thought of Bradley as a toddler, laughing as I tossed him in the air. That memory was mine alone. At the edge of the dock, I put on my mask. If I'm not back in 2 hours, get as far from the lake as you can. The water didn't feel cold when I entered. It felt like slipping into a bath, warm, inviting. Wrong for a lake this deep. I descended steadily, following the underwater cliff that led to the deepest basin. The visibility was unnaturally good. I could see clearly for hundreds of feet, though the water should have been murky at this depth. At 200 feet, I felt the first brush against my mind, a gentle suggestion to remove my mask. I focused on Bradley's laugh and pushed deeper. At 400 feet, I saw the cave entrance. It wasn't on any map, a gaping mouth in the rock face. Beside it were items scattered on the lake bed. Watches, glasses, a camera I recognized as Andrew's. I placed the first device at the cave entrance. As I swam inside, the cave widened into a vast chamber. The walls glowed with the same blue bioluminescence I'd seen near the surface. It pulsed in rhythm, like a heartbeat. I placed the second device where the chamber narrowed again. My watch said I'd been underwater for 40 minutes, but it felt like hours. Each movement was a struggle now, not against water resistance, but against the growing pressure in my mind. Take off your mask. You don't need it anymore. You're home now. The voice wasn't coming through my ears. It was inside my head, warm and familiar, though I'd never heard it before. The tunnel opened into an enormous cavern, so large I couldn't see the ceiling or walls. And there, suspended in the center, was the creature. It was beautiful, in a terrible way. Like a giant squid, but translucent, with thousands of glowing eyes across its body. Parts of it seemed solid, others like mist. It pulsed with light from within, blue and green and colors I had no names for. Around it floated what looked like human bodies, but changed. Elongated limbs, skin turning translucent, moving in slow circles like planets around a sun. I recognized Andrew among them. And there was Vanessa, halfway through her transformation, her legs now a single flowing appendage, her eyes enormous and glassy. The creature didn't attack. It didn't need to. Every second in its presence made me want to stay, to join the dance. With tremendous effort, I placed the final device on a rock outcropping and activated the timer. 3 minutes. As I turned to leave, time slowed to a crawl. What had been easy on the way in now felt like swimming through molasses. 2 minutes. The tunnel seemed to stretch endlessly before me. My air gauge showed plenty left, but my lungs burned as if I couldn't get enough. 1 minute. I was only halfway to the entrance when I felt the creature's attention focus fully on me. The water around me began to swirl, pulling me backward. Stay with us, Marcus. Your son will join us soon. Everyone will. Bradley's face flashed in my mind, but distorted underwater, eyes like the creature's. 0. The devices activated with a pulse I felt rather than heard. The creature screamed, not with sound but with feeling. Pain and rage flooded through the water through me. The cave entrance was right there, just feet away, when the roof began to collapse. Rocks crashed around me as the cave entrance started to collapse. I had seconds to make it out, but something caught my eye, movement in a small side tunnel. I shouldn't have looked. I should have swum for the exit. But Navy training dies hard. You don't leave people behind. Using my flashlight, I saw them. Andrew and Vanessa huddled in an air pocket, their bodies only partly changed. Their eyes were clear again, frightened. The sonic pulse had broken the creature's hold on them. The main exit crumbled completely as another tremor shook the cave. We were trapped. This way, I signaled, pointing to the small tunnel. It was our only chance. We swam single file through the tight passage, my tank scraping the rock ceiling. The water was cooling rapidly now, the unnatural warmth fading as the creature retreated from the sound waves. My dive computer showed we'd been underwater for nearly 2 hours. Above us, Bradley and the others would be wondering if I was still alive. The tunnel split in 2 directions. One path led upward, possibly to the surface. The other descended back toward the main cavern. I could feel the creature's presence there, weaker but still conscious, waiting for the sonic waves to end. Go that way, I pointed Andrew and Vanessa toward the upward path. I'll be right behind you. It was a lie. There was only enough air in my tank for one person to make the ascent safely. I switched my regulator to Vanessa, whose changes were more advanced, her lungs likely less efficient. Andrew shook his head, understanding my plan. He tried to push the regulator back to me, but I refused. Tell my son I kept my promise, I mouthed, clearly, making sure he understood. I came back, just not all the way. They didn't want to leave me, but another cave-in started, forcing their decision. With a last glance back, they swam upward, disappearing from view. Alone now, holding my breath, I felt the creature reaching for my mind again. Weaker than before, but persistent. You are dying, Marcus. Join us and live forever. My lungs burned for air. Black spots danced in my vision. The temptation to inhale water grew stronger. Above me, through hundreds of feet of rock and water, I somehow felt, rather than heard, a new sound. a different frequency cutting through the water. Higher, sharper, Bradley. He must have adjusted the equipment, found a frequency the creature couldn't tolerate. The presence in my mind screeched and withdrew like a hand from flame. The water around me churned violently, then stilled as the creature retreated to the deepest part of the lake, seeking escape from the sound. My vision was tunneling now, darkness creeping in. This was it, but I wasn't afraid anymore. Then my hand brushed against something solid, a small air pocket trapped against the ceiling of the tunnel. I pressed my face into it and gasped, filling my lungs with precious oxygen. It wouldn't last long, but it gave me time to think. The creature was weakened, hibernating now, but not dead. Never dead. It would wake again in 40 years, hungry and angry, unless someone was here to stop it. Someone who understood it. Someone it couldn't control completely. My hands found a small ledge where I could wedge myself half out of the water. As consciousness faded, I felt changes spreading through my body, fingers webbing slightly, lung capacity expanding. My last clear thought was of Bradley. He was safe. They all were for now. And in 40 years, when the lake warmed again and the creature stirred, I would be waiting. My name is Martin Abernathy, and I've been a ranger here in the Boundary Waters for 25 years. These forests and lakes are in my blood. My grandfather was a ranger, my father too, and now me. I know every island, every hidden cove, and every trail like the back of my hand. At least, I thought I did. It started on a chilly fall morning. The leaves were changing, bright reds and golds against the dark green pines. I got a call on my radio about something strange near Eagle Point cabins. Campers said shadows were moving when they shouldn't be. I've heard all kinds of stories over the years. People see things in the wilderness when they're alone. Usually, it's nothing. This time was different. I took my truck down the service road and hiked the last mile to the cabins. Everything looked normal at first, but then I saw it. A perfect circle of dead plants about 20 feet across. Every leaf, every blade of grass inside that circle was brown and crispy, like it had been dead for weeks. But I'd been here just 3 days ago, and everything was green. That's not right, I whispered to myself. I knelt down and touched the dead grass. It crumbled between my fingers. As I stood up, my hand started to shake. It's been doing that more lately. The doctor called it Parkinson's early stage. I haven't told anyone yet, not even my daughter Heather. I don't want her to worry. I pushed my hand into my pocket and kept looking around. That's when I found more circles, not circles exactly, but perfect hexagons, like honeycomb shapes. 5 of them, all the same size, all with everything inside them dead. No footprints, no tire tracks, no signs that anyone had been here at all. I took out my camera and started taking pictures. My boss would want evidence. While I was snapping photos, I noticed something strange. My shadow on the ground didn't move right. Just for a second, it seemed to lag behind me, like it was moving a half second too slow. I blinked hard and looked again. Normal now. Must have been my imagination. Near the 3rd hexagon, I found an abandoned campsite. The tent was still up, sleeping bags inside. A pot of beans sat on a cold campfire. A backpack leaned against a tree, wallet and car keys still inside. But no people. It was like they just vanished in the middle of making dinner. I found a small notebook tucked in the backpack. The handwriting started neat but got messier with each page. Sept 15, great spot by the lake. Saw a moose this morning. Set 16, strange shadows at sunset, longer than they should be. Set 17, shadows moving wrong. Jane says I'm seeing things. Set 18, woke up at 3:33 a.m. Something tall outside tent. Trail camera should have caught it. The last entry was just scribbled words. They come from the shadows. And 3:33 again. I checked the trail camera that was strapped to a nearby tree. The screen showed it had taken pictures at exactly 3:33 a.m. for the past 3 nights. I scrolled through them and my blood went cold. In each picture, there was something tall and thin standing at the edge of the campsite, too tall to be human, maybe 8 or 9 feet. The shape had what looked like branches or antlers coming from its head. The pictures were blurry, like the camera couldn't quite focus on it. And the thing had no features, just a dark silhouette, darker than the night around it. I tucked the camera and journal into my pack. The forest had gone quiet, no birds singing, no squirrels chattering. Even the wind seemed to have stopped. I'd never heard the woods this silent in all my years here. On my way back to the truck, I spotted a deer running full speed through the trees. Then another, then a whole herd, moving fast, eyes wide with fear. Behind them came a fox, then some rabbits, animals that would normally never travel together. They were all running from something. That night in my cabin, I spread out my star charts. Astronomy has been my hobby since I was a kid. The stars were lining up in a way that happens only every 47 years or so. The last time was 1945, and before that, 1898. I circled the date when the alignment would be complete, 7 days from now. As I was rolling up the chart, my hand seized up again. The tremor was worse than usual. I tried to steady it with my other hand, but then the lights flickered. Just for a second, but in that moment I saw my shadow on the wall. It wasn't shaking at all, and when I turned my head to look at it, I could swear it turned a half-second later. I didn't sleep much that night. Every sound made me sit up and look at the window, and each time the shadows outside seemed a little darker, a little deeper than they should have been. Something was wrong in my forest, and I had 7 days to figure out what. The next morning, I headed straight to the ranger station. My old metal desk was piled with maps and reports, but I pushed them aside and pulled out the historical records. If something strange was happening, maybe it had happened before. The file cabinet in the back room held records going back almost 100 years. I found what I was looking for in a dusty folder marked 1945, unexplained. Inside were black and white photos showing the same perfect hexagon shapes of dead plants. A report written by Ranger Tom Wilson described unusual shadow behavior and missing hikers who left all belongings behind. The dates matched the same star pattern I'd charted last night. I dug deeper and found similar reports from 1898 and 1851. Always the same pattern, always during the same star alignment, always lasting about 10 days. My hands trembled as I closed the last folder. This time I knew it wasn't just the Parkinson's, it was fear. Something had been coming to these woods every 47 years, and very few people seemed to know about it. I remembered the old trunk in my attic, the one with my grandfather's things. He'd been a ranger during the 1945 incident. Back at my cabin, I pulled down the trunk and wiped away the dust. Inside, I found his old uniform, some fishing lures, and a small leather journal I'd never seen before. The first page had a warning written in my grandfather's neat handwriting. If you are reading this, they have returned. The long ones come when the stars align. They hunger for shadows. Do not let them take yours. I sat on the floor and read the whole journal. Grandfather wrote about tall figures that moved between trees at night. He called them the long ones and said they could step through shadows like doorways. People who lost their shadows to them became empty, alive, but not really living anymore. As the sun began to set, I looked out my window. The shadows of the pine trees stretched longer than they should have, all pointing toward the hexagon clearings. My phone rang, making me jump. It was Bill Thompson, a wildlife photographer who camped out here every fall. "Martin, you need to see this video I took last night," he said, his voice shaking. "I can't explain it. I drove to meet him at the Pine Lake Trailhead. He looked like he hadn't slept, his eyes wide and jumpy. Watch," he said, holding out his camera. The video showed a campfire at night. normal at first, then the shadows cast by the fire started to move wrong. They stretched away from the flames instead of toward them. One shadow seemed to stand up, on its own, growing taller until it disappeared into the darkness. I packed up and left right after that, Bill said. Never seen anything like it in 30 years of nature photography. I thanked him and copied the video to my phone. On the drive back, my hand seized up so badly I had to pull over. The tremors were getting worse, but something strange happened. When I drove past one of the hexagon clearings, my hand suddenly went still. No shaking at all. The moment I passed, the tremors returned. That night I took the night patrol. The air was colder than it should have been for September, my breath fogging in front of me. I carried my flashlight and my grandfather's journal, stopping at each hexagon clearing to take readings with my thermometer. Each clearing was exactly 17 degrees colder than the surrounding forest. And standing in the center of each one, my tremors completely stopped. Near the largest clearing, I found something carved into an old oak tree, not fresh carvings, but old ones, worn by decades of weather. They showed tall, thin figures with branching heads. Between them were smaller human shapes and what looked like lines connecting the humans to the tall figures. As I shined my light on the carvings, I heard a twig snap behind me. I spun around, but my flashlight showed only trees and darkness. Yet for a moment I could have sworn I saw something tall slip behind a distant pine. The shadows between the trees seemed deeper than they should be, like patches of pure darkness. When I shined my light directly at them, they looked normal, but at the edge of my vision they seemed to move. I hurried back to my truck, feeling watched the whole way. In my rearview mirror, I kept seeing movement just at the edge of the headlights. Reach. But when I turned to look directly, nothing was there. That night, I laid my grandfather's journal, the historical reports, and my star charts on the kitchen table. The pattern was clear now. Every 47 years, when the stars aligned just right, something came to our woods, something that hunted shadows, and we had just 6 days until the alignment would be complete. I jumped at a sound outside my window, just a branch scraping the glass, but when I went to look, I noticed my shadow on the curtain. I raised my hand. My shadow raised its hand a full second later. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those tall shapes standing between trees. I kept getting up to check my shadow on the wall, making sure it moved when I moved. The phone rang at 5:30 a.m., jolting me awake. It was the emergency line. Ranger Abernathy. A woman's voice was shaking, almost whispering. Something's wrong at our campsite. The shadows, they're reaching for us. Where are you? I grabbed my keys, already heading for the door. Blue Heron Point, site number 8. Please hurry. Her voice cut off with a scream. I drove faster than I should have, gravel spraying behind my truck. The sun was just coming up, making long shadows across the road. I tried not to look at them too closely. When I got to Blue Heron Point, my stomach dropped. The campsite was empty, but nothing was packed up. A coffee pot still sat on the camping stove. 2 folding chairs faced the lake. A novel lay open on one of them, pages fluttering in the breeze. No footprints led away from the camp, no sign of a struggle. They were just gone. Then I saw something that made my blood run cold. On the ground near the tent were 2 dark shapes. Human shapes like shadows pressed into the dirt. They looked exactly like the shadows of a man and woman standing side by side. But there was nobody there to cast them. I knelt down and touched one of the shadow shapes. It felt ice cold and slightly damp, like morning dew. When I pulled my hand back, my fingertips were stained black, but the mark faded after a few seconds. As I stood up, I caught my own shadow moving at the corner of my eye. When I turned to look directly at it, it matched my movements perfectly, but I could have sworn it had moved on its own first. The woods were dead quiet. No birds, no squirrels, not even insects buzzing. just heavy silence pressing down like a wait. I took photos of everything and called it in. 2 missing campers at Blue Heron Point. Send backup. I didn't mention the shadows pressed into the ground. Who would believe me? Back at the ranger station, I pulled out my grandfather's journal again, searching for answers. He wrote about shadow imprints left behind when the Long Ones took someone. According to him, the victims weren't dead, but they weren't really alive either. Their shadows were taken, leaving their bodies empty. I remembered Joseph Kingbird, an Ojibwe elder who lived on the edge of the park. If anyone knew the old stories about these woods, it would be him. Joseph lived in a small cabin, surrounded by birch trees. His pickup truck was at least 30 years old, but still running. He didn't seem surprised to see me. "I've been expecting someone," he said, inviting me in. His cabin smelled like wood smoke and pine. "The shadows are moving again." My heart skipped. "You know about them?" Joseph nodded, his weathered face serious. "My grandfather told me stories. The shadow walkers come when the star path opens. They don't belong in our world, and they can't stay here long. But when they come, they hunt." "Hunt? What?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "They hunt shadows. Your shadow is part of your spirit. When they take it, your body keeps going, but the real you is gone." He looked at me closely. "You've seen them, haven't you?" I told him everything. The hexagons, the missing people, the shadow imprints, the strange way my Parkinson's tremors stopped in certain places. Joseph listened quietly, then went to an old trunk in the corner. He pulled out a small leather pouch. "Your shaking sickness might actually help you," he said. "The shadow walkers have trouble with people whose minds work differently. The electricity in your brain doesn't flow the way they expect. It confuses them." He handed me the pouch. Inside was a small stone disc with symbols carved around the edge. "My grandfather made this during the last coming. He said it helps see them more clearly. Look through it at dawn or dusk, when the shadows are longest." As I drove back to the station, the sun was starting to set. Long shadows stretched across the road like reaching fingers. At one point I could have sworn the shadow of a tree moved toward my truck as I passed, but I blinked and it was normal again. Back in my office, I got a call from my daughter Heather. She works at the park visitor center during the summer. "Dad, I had a weird feeling all day," she said, "like someone was watching me. And on my walk home, it felt like the shadows were deeper than they should be." My chest tightened. "Listen carefully. Heather, I want you to come stay at my cabin for a few days. Don't walk through the woods alone, especially not at dawn or dusk. I'll explain everything when you get here." After we hung up, I stood by the window watching the sun sink below the trees. As the shadows lengthened across the parking lot, I held up Joseph's stone disc and looked through it. At first I saw nothing unusual. Then between 2 distant pines, something moved, tall and thin, with a head that branched like antlers. It stood perfectly still, but somehow I knew it was looking right at me. I blinked, and it was gone. But a message on my desk caught my eye. 3 more reports of abandoned campsites had come in while I was gone. All personal belongings left behind, all near perfect hexagon clearings, and all with shadow imprints pressed into the ground. We had 5 days until the star alignment was complete. 5 days before whatever was happening would reach its peak. I looked down at my hands. For once, they weren't shaking at all. The next morning dawned foggy and cold. I picked up Heather from her small apartment near the visitor center. She threw her backpack in my truck and climbed in, her face serious. "Dad, what's going on? You look like you haven't slept in days." I wasn't sure how much to tell her. Heather has always been practical like her mother was. She believes in what she can see and touch. "There's something strange happening in the park," I said finally. "People are going missing. I think it might be dangerous for you to be alone right now." She studied my face. "This is about those weird dead patches in the forest, isn't it? The perfectly shaped ones. Campers have been talking about them. Before I could answer, my radio crackled. "Ranger Abernathy, come in." It was Mike Reynolds, one of our maintenance workers. "Go ahead, Mike." "I'm at the boat launch by Pine Lake. Something, I don't know how to explain it. You need to see this." "On my way," I said. I looked at Heather. "Want to come along?" She nodded. "Whatever's happening, I want to know." The fog hung between the trees as we drove, making everything look ghostly. Shapes appeared and disappeared in the white mist. Once, I slammed on the brakes because I thought I saw something tall standing in the road. But it was just a dead tree. Mike was waiting at the boat launch, pacing back and forth. When he saw us, his face flooded with relief. "Thank God you're here." I was checking the dock when I don't even know what I saw. "Take it slow," I said. "Tell me exactly what happened." Mike pointed to the lake. "I was fixing a loose board on the dock. Then I heard something moving in the trees over there. When I looked up, I saw this tall person. But not a person. Too tall, too thin. And its head was all wrong." My mouth went dry. "Did it do anything?" Mike's hands were shaking. "It just stood there watching. Then it sort of reached out, not with its arms, but with its shadow. The shadow stretched across the ground like it was made of rubber, all the way to where I was standing. When it touched my shadow, I felt cold all over." He rolled up his sleeve. On his arm was a black mark, like a handprint made of soot. "It touched me through my shadow. Then it started pulling, like it was trying to peel my shadow off the ground. I ran. When I looked back, it was gone." He swallowed hard. "The thing is, Marty, I don't cast a shadow anymore. Look." He stepped into a patch of sunlight breaking through the fog. He was right. While my shadow and Heather's stretched out normally, Mike cast nothing at all. "How do you feel?" I asked quietly. "Cold. Like I'm hollow inside. And sounds seem far away. Like I'm hearing everything through water." I remembered what Joseph had said about people whose shadows were taken. Their bodies kept going, but the real person was gone. Mike didn't look gone. He was talking, moving, thinking, but something was definitely wrong. "We need to get you somewhere safe," I said. "Come back to the station with us." As we walked to the truck, I noticed Heather staring into the trees. "What is it?" I asked. "I feel like something's watching us," she whispered. "And it's hungry." Back at the ranger station, I set up my camera to record Mike. I needed proof of what was happening. While the camera rolled, I asked him questions, trying to document everything. Halfway through, my hand started shaking badly. A Parkinson's tremor worse than usual. But then something strange happened. The tremor suddenly stopped. At the exact same moment, Heather gasped. "Dad," she whispered, pointing to the window. "Look!" Through the glass, I saw a shadow moving across the parking lot, not attached to anything, just a dark shape sliding over the ground. It paused at the edge of the building, then melted into the shadow of the ranger station. "You saw that?" I asked Heather. Mike hadn't reacted at all. She nodded, her face pale. "What was it?" "I think it's what took Mike's shadow. And I think my tremors stop when they're near. It's like my Parkinson's can sense them somehow." That night, I set up cameras around my cabin. If these things were real, I needed evidence. Heather helped me, though I could tell she was scared. She kept looking over her shoulder at the darkening forest. "Dad," she said, as we finished setting up the last camera, "when I look at the shadows between the trees, sometimes I see shapes moving. Just for a second, then they're gone." A chill ran down my spine. "You can see them," she nodded. "Not clearly, just like dark smudges that move when they shouldn't." I showed her Joseph's stone disc. "Try looking through this." She held it up to her eye, pointing it toward the trees. Her hand started shaking, and she dropped the disc. "There's one out there. Right now," she whispered. "Tall, with a head like branches. It's just standing there watching us." I picked up the disc and looked where she was pointing. At first I saw nothing. Then, between two pines, I caught a glimpse of something impossibly tall and thin. It didn't move, but somehow I knew it was aware of us. I quickly ushered Heather inside and locked the door. We closed all the curtains and turned on every light in the cabin. "What are they?" Heather asked, her voice small. I showed her my grandfather's journal and the historical records. I explained everything I'd learned about the Shadow Walkers and the 47-year cycle. "They're getting stronger," I said. "The alignment will be complete in 4 days. I think that's when they'll be most powerful." That night, we watched the cameras on my laptop. Nothing unusual appeared until exactly 3:33 a.m. The screen showing the backyard flickered and a tall figure walked into view. It moved strangely, not quite walking but gliding. Its head branched out like a deer's antlers, but everything else about it was human-shaped, just stretched too tall and too thin. It stopped in the middle of the yard and seemed to look directly at the camera. Then it reached out one long arm. Its shadow stretched across the ground, much longer than it should have been, reaching toward the cabin wall. Where its shadow touched the cabin, frost formed on the wood. The camera suddenly went dead. When I checked the others, they were all offline too. Heather and I sat in silence, staring at the blank screen. "Dad," she finally whispered, "I think they know we're watching them, and I think they don't like it." Outside, the wind picked up, making the cabin creak. In the spaces between the sounds, I thought I heard something else, a soft whispering, like voices just below the threshold of hearing. My hands weren't shaking anymore, and that scared me more than anything. The next morning, we found frost patterns on the outside walls of the cabin, perfect hexagons, just like the clearings in the forest. My cameras were all fried, like something had drained their batteries. "Completely. We need to understand what we're dealing with," I told Heather over breakfast. "If we can figure out how these shadow walkers work, maybe we can protect ourselves." Heather nodded, pushing her eggs around her plate. She hadn't eaten much. "What do we know for sure about them?" I pulled out a notebook and started making a list. "They appear during a specific star alignment that happens every 47 years. They can move through shadows like doorways. They harvest human shadows, leaving the person empty inside. They seem to hate or fear certain things. The question is," I said, "what do they hate or fear? What keeps them away?" Heather thought for a moment. "Remember when we were setting up the cameras? They stayed back in the trees, away from the cabin lights." "Light," I said, writing it down. "That makes sense. They're shadow creatures. Light would hurt them." We spent the morning gathering every light source we could find. Flashlights, lanterns, work lights from the ranger station. By noon, we had a small arsenal of lighting equipment. "Let's test it," I said, "somewhere away from people in case we're wrong." We drove to a remote area where one of the hexagon clearings had formed. The place felt wrong. Too quiet, too cold, despite the afternoon sun. My tremors had stopped again, which meant they were nearby, watching. I set up a ring of lights around the clearing, powering them with a portable generator. As the sun began to lower in the sky, the shadows between the trees grew deeper. "There," Heather whispered, pointing to a space between 2 pines. I looked through Joseph's stone disc. She was right. A tall, thin shape stood perfectly still, watching us. "Ready?" I asked. Heather nodded. I flipped the switch, and all the lights blazed on at once, flooding the clearing with brightness. A high, thin sound cut through the air, like a whistle, but somehow painful to hear. The shape between the trees vanished. "It worked," Heather said, "but our celebration was short-lived. The generator sputtered and died, plunging us back into the gathering gloom. No matter what I tried, it wouldn't restart. It was like something had drained its power." "Let's try something else," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I pulled out a UV flashlight I sometimes used to track wildlife. When I turned it on and aimed it at the trees, another painful whistle cut the air. The shadows seemed to shrink back from the purple beam. "They really don't like that," Heather said. "The UV light hurts them more than regular light." We tested other things: water, salt, iron filings from the maintenance shed. The shadow walkers seemed unable to cross moving water, even something as small as a stream. Salt did nothing. The iron made them keep their distance, but not as effectively as the UV light. As we worked, I noticed something strange. When a shadow walker was near, the air temperature dropped sharply. I could track their movements just by feeling the cold spots. "Dad," Heather said suddenly, "what if they're not trying to hurt people? What if they need our shadows for something?" I thought about it. Mike is still alive, just empty. Maybe they're using human shadows as some kind of doorway. A way to enter our world fully. Back at the cabin, I spread out my star charts. The alignment was almost complete. 3 days left. According to my grandfather's journal, that's when the shadow walkers would be strongest, able to manifest completely in our world. "If they're trying to open a doorway," I said, "maybe that's why they come every 47 years, when the stars make it possible." That afternoon, we visited Mike at the ranger station. He was still functioning, still talking, but something was off. His movements were mechanical, his eyes dull. When he spoke, there was no emotion in his voice. "How do you feel?" I asked him. "Cold," he said flatly. "Always cold, and I can hear them talking." My heart skipped. "Who?" "The shadow walkers." He nodded, slowly. "They call to me at night. They want me to come to the big clearing, the one by Eagle Cliff. They say others like me will be there too." I showed him a picture of the hexagonal clearing. "Like this one?" "Bigger," he said, "much bigger. It's where they're opening the door." After we left Mike, Heather and I drove to Eagle Cliff. It took some hiking to reach the lookout point, but from there, we could see a large section of the forest below. What we saw made my blood run cold. In the valley below was an enormous hexagonal clearing, at least 100 yards across. It hadn't been there a week ago. Now all the trees inside it were dead, their leaves brown and falling. "That's where it's going to happen," I whispered. "That's where they're going to try to open a permanent doorway into our world." As we watched, a figure appeared at the edge of the clearing. Even from this distance, I could tell it was Mike. He walked stiffly to the center of the hexagon and just stood there, unmoving. "They're using him as a marker," I said, "a beacon." Through binoculars, we saw other people joining Mike, all moving the same wooden way, all standing perfectly still once they reached their positions. And none of them cast shadows, even as the setting sun stretched shadows all around them. "Dad," Heather said, "your hands aren't shaking at all now." She was right. My Parkinson's tremors had completely stopped, and that could only mean one thing. "They're all around us," I whispered. We turned to head back to the car. Standing on the trail behind us was a shadow walker. Up close, it was even more terrifying. At least 9 feet tall, impossibly thin, with skin like dark glass that reflected nothing. Its head branched out in antler-like protrusions that seemed to shift and change as we watched. It didn't move toward us. It didn't need to. Its shadow stretched across the ground, reaching for our feet. Heather screamed and jumped back. I grabbed the UV flashlight from my belt and switched it on, aiming the beam directly at the creature. It made that high whistling sound again, and its form seemed to waver, like heat rising from pavement. Then it simply folded inward, disappearing into a shadow beneath a tree. We ran all the way back to the car. "They're getting bolder," I said as we drove away. "Coming out before full dark now." "What happens when the alignment is complete?" Heather asked, her voice shaking. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. "I think they'll be able to stay in our world, and I think they'll take as many shadows as they can." That night, we covered all the windows with heavy blankets and set up UV lights around the cabin. My tremors had returned once we were safely inside, which meant the shadow walkers were keeping their distance. For now, morning came with heavy fog hanging between the trees. I hadn't slept much. Every noise outside had me reaching for the UV flashlight. Heather was still asleep on the couch, circles under her eyes, showing how little rest she'd gotten. I made coffee and looked at my star charts again. 2 days until the alignment was complete. 2 days to figure out how to stop what was coming. As I sipped my coffee, I remembered something from my grandfather's journal. A mention of special equipment he'd built during the last coming of the Shadow Walkers. But he never said where he kept it. "Heather," I said as she yawned and sat up, "I need to check something in the attic." The attic ladder creaked as we climbed up. Dust and cobwebs covered boxes of old Christmas decorations and camping gear. In the far corner sat an old steamer trunk I'd never opened. It had been locked for as long as I could remember, and I'd never found the key. "What are we looking for?" Heather asked, brushing a spiderweb from her hair. "My grandfather built something to fight these things. It might be up here somewhere." I moved some boxes and spotted a faded symbol painted on the wall. A hexagon with lines through it, just like the clearings in the forest. I pressed my hand against it, and the wooden panel moved, revealing a small space behind it. Inside was a metal box and a key. "Dad," Heather whispered, "do you think that's the key to the trunk?" It was. The trunk opened with a rusty squeal. Inside were strange devices I'd never seen before. Metal rods with crystals attached to them, lamps with special colored lenses, and a leather-bound book titled "A Defense Against the Long Ones." "Grandfather, you brilliant old man," I whispered. We carried everything downstairs. The book contained detailed notes on the Shadow Walkers. According to my grandfather, they came from a place he called the Shadow Realm, a world like ours, but dark and cold, where everything was the opposite of our world. "They can't exist fully in our world," I read aloud. "That's why they take shadows. Each human shadow lets one of them stay here longer." "But why do they want to be here?" Heather asked, examining one of the crystal rods. "It doesn't say, but it does explain how to keep them away. The devices my grandfather built were ingenious. The rods created a barrier of UV light when placed in the ground in a circle. The special lamps emitted a frequency of light that disrupted the Shadow Walker's ability to move through shadows. "We need to warn people," I said. "Get everyone out of the danger zones before the alignment is complete." I called an emergency meeting at the ranger station. Not everyone would believe me, but I had to try. I brought Mike along as evidence. His shadowless condition was hard to dismiss. Park Superintendent Jenkins listened to my explanation with growing concern. When I finished, he looked at Mike, then back at me. "Abernathy, this sounds crazy," he said slowly, "but I've known you for 15 years, and you've never been one for tall tales. And I can't explain what's happened to Mike." He sighed heavily. "What do you need?" "Help evacuating everyone from the areas around the hexagon clearings, and I need men to help set up protection barriers." By noon, we had a plan. The park would be closed to new visitors. Rangers would go to each campsite and cabin, telling people there was a dangerous storm coming and they needed to evacuate. It wasn't the whole truth, but it would get people to safety. Heather and I took my grandfather's equipment to the largest hexagon clearing near Eagle Cliff. As we approached, the air grew colder. My tremors stopped completely. "They're watching us," Heather whispered. Through Joseph's stone disc, I could see them, dozens of shadow walkers standing at the edge of the clearing, just behind the tree line. They didn't move, but I could feel their attention fixed on us. We worked quickly, placing the crystal rods in a large circle around the clearing, well away from the edges. When the last rod was in place, I flipped the switch on the control box. Blue-purple light shot up from each rod, connecting to form a dome of light over the clearing. The high, whistling sound came again, louder this time, as the shadow walkers retreated deeper into the forest. "It's working," Heather said, relief clear in her voice, but as we watched, the lights began to dim. The shadow walkers had moved back to the edge of the trees, and something was happening to them. They seemed to be merging together, becoming One larger, darker mass. The light from the rods flickered and grew weaker. They're combining their strength, I said. We need to go. Now. We barely made it back to the truck before the lights failed completely. In the rearview mirror, I saw dark shapes pouring into the clearing. That night, the shadow walkers became more aggressive. Reports came in from all over the park. Shadows moving on their own, cold spots in cabins, people hearing whispers in the dark. 3 more people had lost their shadows, all found wandering aimlessly near hexagon clearings. At the cabin, I fortified our defenses, UV lights in every window, my grandfather's special lamps at each door. I set up a circle of the crystal rods around the entire cabin, creating a barrier of light. Will it hold? Heather asked as darkness fell. I don't know, I admitted. They're getting stronger by the hour. Outside, the fog had returned, thick and unnatural. Through the windows, we could see shapes moving within it. Tall, thin shapes that paused at the edge of our light barrier, testing it. My radio crackled. It was Jenkins. Abernathy. Something's happening at the Eagle Cliff clearing. All the shadowless. People are walking there like they're being called. And there's something forming in the center. Something big. Don't go near it, I warned. Keep everyone away. After I put down the radio, Heather touched my arm. Dad, your hands are steady. She was right. No tremors at all. And that could only mean one thing. They're here, I whispered. A shadow slid under the door. Not coming from anything, just a patch of darkness moving across the floor on its own. It paused in the center of the room, then began to rise up, forming a tall, thin shape. I grabbed the UV flashlight and aimed it at the shape. The beam went right through it, having no effect. The barrier, Heather gasped. How did it get through the barrier? The shadow figure seemed to look at us, though it had no face, no eyes that I could see. Then it pointed one long arm at me. Voice spoke in my head, cold and ancient. The gateway opens. The shadow realm hungers. You cannot stop what comes. Then it simply collapsed back into a normal shadow and slid away under the door. Heather and I looked at each other, shaken. 1 day left, I said quietly. Tomorrow night, the alignment will be complete. Outside, the fog pressed against the windows. Like something alive, and within it shadows moved, waiting. The next morning dawned unnaturally dark. Heavy clouds hung low, and fog swirled between the trees. It wasn't even 7 a.m., but it felt like dusk. Dad, look at the sky, Heather said, pointing. Out the window, I peered up through the fog. Something was wrong with the sunlight. It seemed dimmer, weaker. And through breaks in the clouds, I could see stars, stars in the daytime sky. The alignment is happening, I said. They're getting stronger. My radio crackled to life. Jenkins's voice came through, strained and static-filled. Abernathy, you there? We've got a major situation. Power's out across the entire park. Phones too. And the road out is blocked by fallen trees. I picked up the radio. What about the evacuation? Got most people out yesterday, but we've still got about 24 campers and staff unaccounted for. And his voice dropped. There's a gathering at Eagle Cliff. All the shadowless people are there, just standing in that big clearing. There. Must be 20 of them now. My heart sank. 20 people who'd lost their shadows. 20 doorways for the shadow walkers. Stay away from them, I warned, and keep everyone else away too. After signing off, I turned to Heather. We need to get to my office at the ranger station. I've got maps there showing all the hexagon locations. We need to understand the pattern. The drive was tense. The fog was so thick I could barely see 10 feet ahead. Twice, I had to stop because shadow figures crossed the road. Tall, thin shapes that moved without sound. At the ranger station, we found Jenkins and 3 other rangers huddled around a battery-powered radio. Their faces were grim. No contact. With the outside world, Jenkins said. We're on our own. In my office, I spread out topographical maps of the park. Heather helped me mark every hexagon clearing we knew about. Look, she said suddenly. They form a pattern. She was right. The smaller hexagons formed a circle around the large one at Eagle Cliff, and when I connected them with lines, they formed a perfect six-pointed star. It's a focusing pattern, I said, remembering something from my grandfather's book. They're channeling energy to the center, to the big clearing. To open the gateway, Heather finished. The overhead lights flickered, then died completely. A moment later, the backup generator kicked in, casting everything in a dim yellow glow. Jenkins burst into the office. Something's happening at Eagle Cliff. The air is moving wrong, and it's getting colder by the minute. We gathered as many UV lights and weapons as we could carry. The temperature was dropping rapidly. I could see my breath inside the station now. My hands were completely steady, which meant shadow walkers were everywhere, just out of sight. As we prepared to leave for Eagle Cliff, a loud crash came from the front of the building. Jenkins ran to check it out. "Helicopters down!" he shouted. When he returned, pilot was coming in to help with evacuation. Says his shadow suddenly ripped away from him mid-flight. He managed to crash land in the parking lot. I rushed outside. The small park helicopter lay on its side, rotors bent. The pilot sat nearby, dazed but alive, and like Mike and the others, he cast no shadow, despite the emergency lights shining on him. "They're getting more aggressive," I told Jenkins. "Taking shadows even from people in the air now." We piled into 2 Ranger trucks. The plan was simple but dangerous. Drive to Eagle Cliff, see what was happening at the main hexagon, and try to disrupt whatever gateway the shadow walkers were creating. The forest was changing as we drove. Ice coated the trees despite it being September. The fog hung in unnatural shapes, sometimes forming tall, thin figures that watched us pass. Several times, shadow things reached for the trucks, only to pull back when they came near our UV lights. About a mile from Eagle Cliff, our vehicles died at once. Engines, lights, everything just stopped. "They've cut us off," Jenkins said. "We walk from here." The forest was eerily silent as we moved forward on foot. No birds, no insects, not even wind. Just the crunch of ice under our boots and our own. Breathing. The UV flashlights carved tunnels of purple light through the fog. Halfway to Eagle Cliff, the attack came. Shadow walkers emerged from between the trees, dozens of them, no longer hiding their presence. They moved like water flowing. "Uphill, impossible and wrong. Circle up," I shouted, and the Rangers formed a tight group, UV lights pointing outward. The beams kept the shadow walkers at bay, but just barely. They tested our defenses, reaching long limbs toward us, then pulling back when they touched the light. "They're learning," Heather whispered. "The light doesn't hurt them as much anymore." She was right. With each passing minute, the shadow walkers pressed closer, their tall forms becoming more solid, more real. Then the voices started, cold whispers in our heads. "Join us. Give us your shadows. Be part of the new world." Ranger Collins screamed and dropped his flashlight. His shadow suddenly stretched toward the nearest shadow walker, like it was being pulled by an invisible rope. "No!" I lunged for him, but it was too late. The shadow walker touched Collins' shadow, and something tore away from him. Collins fell to his knees, eyes empty, face blank. When he stood again, he turned silently and walked toward Eagle Cliff, joining the procession of the shadowless. "Run!" Jenkins shouted. "Everyone to Eagle Cliff!" We ran through the forest, UV lights swinging wildly. Shadow walkers pursued us, moving impossibly fast, sometimes disappearing and reappearing ahead of us. When we finally broke through the trees, at Eagle Cliff, the sight stopped us cold. The huge hexagon clearing now held all the shadowless people, at least 30 of them, standing in a precise pattern that matched the star on my map. In the center, something was forming. A tear in the air itself, like reality was being pulled apart. Through the tear, I could see another world, an inverted version of our forest where everything was in shades of gray and black. Dark shapes moved in that other place, pressing against the tear, trying to get through. At the edge of the clearing stood dozens of shadow walkers, their forms now fully solid. They no longer looked like shadows. They had a terrible substance to them, like glass filled with black smoke. Their antlered heads turned toward us in perfect unison. "The gateway opens," they said together, their voices in our heads. "The shadow realm comes through." The tear in the center grew larger. Cold air poured from it, so frigid it burned my lungs. More shadowless people walked past us, drawn to their places in the pattern. "We have to close it," I said. "We have to stop this now." But as I stepped forward, shadow walkers moved to block our path. Our UV lights flickered and dimmed, batteries draining rapidly in the intense cold. One by one, the rangers' lights went out, and as each light died, shadow walkers surged forward, reaching for our shadows. "Back to the trees," Jenkins yelled. "We need cover." We retreated, but it was too late for two more rangers. Their shadows torn away, they turned and walked stiffly to join the others in the clearing. Only Jenkins, Heather, and I made it back to the tree line. Our last UV light flickered and died. In the darkness, surrounded by tall shapes closing in, Heather grabbed my hand. "Dad," she whispered, "what do we do now?" I squeezed her hand tight. "We run. Back to the cabin. I have one more idea." As shadow walkers reached for us, we ran into the forest, back toward the only safe place I could think of. Behind us, the tear in reality grew larger, and the invasion from the shadow realm began. We ran through the dark forest, stumbling over roots and rocks. The fog swirled around us, sometimes forming hands that reached for our ankles. Jenkins was just behind us, his breathing heavy and panicked. "Keep going," I shouted to Heather. "Don't look back," but I could feel them following, the shadow walkers sliding between trees, moving faster than we could run. My hands were completely steady now, no trace of tremors. They were all around us. A shadow shot across our path. Jenkins cried out. When I turned, he was on his knees, a tall figure standing over him. The shadow walker's hand was sunk deep into Jenkins' shadow. As I watched, something dark pulled away from Jenkins, something that should have been part of him. "Go," Jenkins shouted, his voice already growing flat and empty. "Get to the cabin." We had no choice. We ran, leaving Jenkins behind. I could hear him getting up, his footsteps turning back toward Eagle Cliff, joining the others. The cabin finally appeared through the trees. We sprinted the last 100 yards and burst through the door, slamming it behind us. I threw the deadbolt and started grabbing furniture, pushing it against the door. "Will that hold them?" Heather asked, her voice shaking. "No," I said honestly, "but we don't need it to hold for long." I went to the pile of my grandfather's equipment we'd brought back from the attic. At the bottom was a box I hadn't opened yet. Inside was something that looked like a metal mirror in a heavy frame, with strange symbols carved around the edge. "What is that?" Heather asked. Grandfather called it a shadow trap. According to his journal, it can capture a shadow walker and hold it. How does it work? I'm not sure exactly, but I have an idea. Outside, the fog pressed against the windows. Dark shapes moved around the cabin, testing the walls, looking for a way in. The temperature dropped so fast, the windows frosted over. My breath came out in white clouds. "They're trying to get in," Heather whispered. I set up the mirror on the kitchen table, facing the door. Then I gathered all the reflective surfaces I could find, handheld mirrors, the glass from picture frames, even the shiny metal lid of a cooking pot. Grandfather wrote that they can be trapped in reflective surfaces, I explained as I worked. If we can capture one, maybe we can learn how to stop them. But how do we get one in here without letting them all in? Heather asked. I looked at her gravely. We have to let one in, just one. Her eyes widened. Dad, no, that's too dangerous. We don't have a choice. The gateway is opening. If we don't stop it, they'll take over everything. I positioned the smaller mirrors and reflective surfaces all around the room, angling them to create a path that led to the large mirror on the table. When I opened the door, I said, "Stand behind me." No matter what happens, don't let your shadow touch theirs. Heather nodded, her face pale but determined. I'm ready. I took a deep breath and moved to the door. With one quick motion, I pulled away the furniture and threw the door open. They were waiting, 3 shadow walkers standing in the fog, their antlered heads turned toward us. For a moment, nobody moved. Then the middle one stepped forward, tall and thin, its dark form now solid enough to block the little light that remained. Come in, I said to it, just you. The shadow walker tilted its head, as if confused by the invitation. Then it moved forward, ducking to fit through the doorway. The moment it was inside, I slammed the door shut. The shadow walker straightened, to its full height, nearly touching the ceiling. It had no face, just a smooth, dark surface where a face should be. But somehow, I knew it was looking at me. Now, Heather, I shouted. Heather flipped on the single UV light we had left. The beam hit the first mirror, bouncing to the second, creating a cage of light that surrounded the shadow walker. It made that high whistling sound and tried to retreat, but there was nowhere to go. The light drove it toward the big mirror on the table. When it touched the mirror's surface, something incredible happened. The mirror didn't reflect the shadow walker. It pulled it in like water sucking down a drain. The shadow walker's form stretched and distorted, flowing into the mirror until it disappeared completely. The mirror's surface turned black as night, but something moved within it, like a cloud of dark smoke trapped behind glass. We did it. Heather breathed, but our victory was short-lived. Outside, the other shadow walkers had gone silent. Then a new sound started, a low humming that made the windows vibrate. The temperature dropped even further, ice forming on the inside of the glass now. In the mirror, the trapped shadow walker began to change. Its form became clearer, more defined, and suddenly it spoke. Not in my head this time, but out loud, in a voice like rustling leaves. The gateway opens fully at midnight, it said. When the stars align perfect, then all will belong to the shadow realm. Why? I demanded. Why are you doing this? Our world dies, it said simply. Yours is warm, full of light, full of shadows we can use. We need your world to survive. But you're taking people's shadows, Heather said. You're hurting them. The trapped shadow walker turned toward her voice. They are not hurt. They become like us, part of us. A chill ran down my spine. The shadowless people, they're turning into shadow walkers. Yes. When the gateway opens fully, all who have given shadows will transform. They will help us bring others across. How do we close the gateway? I asked. The shadow walker made a sound like dry branches breaking, a laugh. You cannot. It is too late. Outside, the humming grew louder. The cabin walls creaked under some invisible pressure. Through frosted windows, I could see more shadow walkers gathering, dozens of them now surrounding the cabin. We need to get back to Eagle Cliff, I said to Heather. We need to try to close that gateway. How? We can't fight all of them. I looked at the trapped shadow walker in the mirror. We'll take this with us. Maybe we can use it somehow. I carefully wrapped the mirror in a blanket and put it in my backpack. Then I checked my watch. 6:12 p.m. Less than 6 hours until midnight, when the alignment would be complete. We need a plan, I said. We can't just run out there. Heather pointed to a map of the park on the wall. What about the river? Shadow walkers can't cross running water, right? We could take the canoe. It was a good idea. The river ran within, a half-mile of Eagle Cliff. We could follow it most of the way. Protected by the running water, we gathered what supplies we could. My grandfather's remaining equipment, extra batteries, warm clothes. The temperature was still dropping rapidly. Outside, it had to be well below freezing now, unnatural for September. As we prepared to leave through the back door, away from the gathered shadow walkers, I heard a soft tapping on the bedroom window. I motioned for Heather to be quiet and crept down the hallway to look. A face peered in through the frosted glass. Joseph Kingbird, the Ojibwe elder. I quickly opened the window and helped him inside. They're everywhere, he said, his breath fogging in the cold air. I came to help. How did you get past them? Heather asked. Joseph held up a small pouch. Old medicine. Confuses them, makes them see wrong. I told him our plan to reach Eagle Cliff by river and try to close the gateway somehow. Joseph nodded, gravely. The gateway must be closed from both sides. Someone must go through to the Shadow Realm and close it from there. My heart sank. Go through, into their world. It is the only way. The gateway is like a door. It must be closed from both sides to seal properly. I looked at Heather, then back at Joseph. I'll go. Dad, no. Heather grabbed my arm. You can't. I have to, I said gently. My Parkinson's makes me resistant to them. They have trouble grabbing my shadow. It has to be me. Joseph nodded. This is true. Your shaking sickness protects you, but still, it is dangerous. You may not be able to return. If it saves everyone else, it's worth the risk, I said. We left through the back door while Joseph worked his medicine at the front, creating a distraction. The Shadow Walkers sensed something wrong at the front of the cabin and moved toward it, leaving our path to the river clear. We ran through the freezing forest, frost crunching under our feet. The northern lights had appeared in the sky, green and purple curtains of light dancing above the trees. But these weren't natural. They moved wrong, pulsing in time with the humming that filled the air. The river was half frozen when we reached it, ice forming at the edges. We launched the canoe into the still-flowing center and paddled hard against the current. Shadow Walkers appeared on both banks following us, but they couldn't cross the water. As we paddled, the sky grew darker. Stars appeared, too many stars, as if the night sky of another world was overlapping with ours, and directly above Eagle Cliff, the stars formed a pattern, a perfect hexagon with a dark center like a hole in the sky. The alignment, Joseph said, looking up. It is nearly complete. We beached the canoe where the river came closest to Eagle Cliff and continued on foot. The humming was much louder now, vibrating in my chest. The air felt thin and cold, hard to breathe. As we crested the final ridge and Eagle Cliff came into view, we all stopped in shock. The hexagon clearing now held a swirling vortex of darkness, a black tornado that reached from the ground to the sky. Around it, the shadowless people stood perfectly still, their bodies beginning to stretch and change, becoming taller, thinner, and pouring from the vortex were shadow walkers, hundreds of them, stepping into our world. The invasion had begun. We, crouched behind a fallen tree, watching the nightmare unfold at Eagle Cliff. The gateway had grown into a swirling black tornado that touched the sky. More shadow walkers stepped through every minute. How do we get close to that? Heather whispered. I pulled the mirror from my backpack. The trapped shadow walker still moved inside it like dark smoke behind glass. You, I said to it, how do we close the gateway? The trapped shadow walker's form shifted. The center stone must be removed, the stone that anchors the gateway to your world. What stone? Joseph asked. At the center of the vortex, a black stone from our world. I squinted at the swirling darkness. At its base, something glinted, a black rock the size of a basketball, hovering just above the ground. I see it, I said. But how do we get to it with all of them guarding it? Joseph pulled out his medicine pouch. I can create a diversion. My medicine will confuse them, make them look away. And I've still got this, Heather added, holding up the last UV light. It's not as strong as before, but it might help clear a path. I nodded, a plan forming. Okay. Joseph creates a diversion on the far side of the clearing. Heather, you use the UV light to clear me a path to the center. I'll grab the stone and then... I hesitated. According to Joseph, the gateway had to be closed from both sides. And then I'll go through, I finished. Close it from their side. Dad, no! Heather's eyes filled with tears. There has to be another way. There isn't, I said gently. Someone has to go through. It should be me. Will you be able to come back? She asked. I looked at Joseph, who shook his head slightly. I'll try, I promised, though I knew it might not be possible. We waited until Joseph had circled around to the far side of the clearing. The signal came, a sudden flare of red light on the opposite edge of the hexagon. The shadow walkers turned toward it, their antlered heads moving in unison. Now, I whispered. Heather switched on the UV light, carving a purple path through the darkness. We ran, keeping low. The light wasn't as effective as before. The shadow walkers flinched from it, but didn't retreat completely. Still, it created enough space for us to move forward. We were halfway to the center when they noticed us. A high whistling filled the air as shadow walkers turned away from Joseph's diversion and moved toward us. Faster! I urged Heather. We ran harder. Shadow walkers closed in from all sides, reaching for us with impossibly long arms. One brushed Heather's shoulder and she cried out in pain, the spot instantly frosting over. The center of the vortex was just ahead now. I could see the black stone clearly, a smooth glass-like rock that floated a few inches above the ground, pulsing with dark energy. I'll hold them off, Heather shouted, swinging the UV light in an arc around us. Get the stone! I sprinted the last few yards, ducking under reaching shadows. The vortex roared above me, a tornado of cold darkness that pulled at my clothes and hair. The black stone hovered right in front of me now. Close up, I could see it wasn't solid. Galaxies of tiny lights swirled inside it, like stars seen from very far away. I reached out and grabbed it with both hands. Pain shot through my arms, a cold so intense it burned. The stone fought me, trying to pull free. It was heavier than it looked, like trying to lift a boulder. Dad! Heather screamed. The shadow walkers had surrounded her, their forms merging into a wall of darkness that pressed against her, failing. UV light. With one final effort, I wrenched the stone from its position. The effect was immediate. The vortex shuddered, the roaring sound faltering, but it wasn't closing. The gateway remained open, wavering, but still there. The other side! Joseph shouted from somewhere in the chaos. It must be sealed from both sides. I looked at the gateway, then back at Heather. She was fighting desperately, but the shadow walkers were overwhelming her. In seconds, they would take her shadow. I made my decision. Still clutching the black stone, I ran to Heather. Here! I thrust the mirror into her hands, the one containing the trapped shadow walker. Keep this safe. If I don't come back, it might help you understand them, find another way. Dad, please, she begged. Don't go. I hugged her quickly. I have, too. I love you. Then I turned and ran straight into the vortex, carrying the black stone. The world turned inside out. Colors inverted, sound became pressure, up became down. I was falling and flying at the same time, tumbling through a space that had too many directions. When I finally landed, I found myself in a place that was like our world, but wrong. The trees were the same shape, but transparent, like they were made of smoke. The ground felt solid, but looked like dark water. The sky overhead was black, with stars that formed unfamiliar patterns. The shadow realm. I stood at one end of a vast clearing, the mirror image of Eagle Cliff. At the center was another vortex, this one glowing with white light. Through it, I could dimly see the world I'd left behind. I could see Heather, surrounded by shadow walkers, the UV light failing in her hand. Around the glowing gateway stood figures, human-shaped, but translucent, like they were made of dark glass. Not shadow walkers, but something else. Then I realized these were the original shadows, the ones taken from people in my world. They turned toward me, surprised by my presence. I still held the black stone, which now glowed with internal light. You don't belong here, one of the shadows said. It had Jenkins' shape. I've come to close the gateway, I replied. We cannot allow that, another shadow said, this one looking like Mike. Our world is dying. Yours is our only hope. But you're hurting people, I argued. Taking their shadows changes them. They join us here, Jenkins' shadow explained. They become part of our world. It is not death, but it's not their choice, I said. You're taking them against their will. The shadow beings conferred among themselves, speaking in a language I couldn't understand. Finally, Jenkins' shadow approached me again. What do you propose? Our world is fading. The light grows weaker each cycle. Without new shadows, we will cease to exist. I looked at the black stone in my hands. An idea formed. Crazy, desperate, but maybe our only chance. What if you could visit our world, but without taking shadows? What if we found a way for both worlds to exist without one destroying the other? The shadow beings seemed intrigued. How would this be possible? I don't know exactly, I admitted, but we can try to find a way, together, starting with closing this gateway before it tears both our worlds apart. The shadow beings conferred again. While they talked, I studied the gateway from this side. The vortex of light had a similar anchor. A white stone floating at its base, the opposite of the black one I carried. If I removed that stone while also placing the black one, perhaps the gateway would close in a balanced way, sealing the tear between worlds without destroying either side. We will consider your proposal, Jenkins' shadow finally said, but the gateway must remain open until we decide. It can't, I insisted. Look, I pointed back through the gateway. On the other side, the shadow walkers had nearly reached Heather. The UV light was almost dead, and beyond her, more shadow walkers were spreading out into the forest, hunting for more shadows. They're destroying my world, I said, and if my world dies, yours will too. We're connected, don't you see? Two sides of the same reality. The shadow beings looked troubled. Finally, Jenkins' shadow nodded. Very well, close the gateway. But we will hold you to your promise, to find a way for both worlds to exist together. With their permission, I approached the white stone at the base of the gateway. It glowed like a tiny sun, painful to look at directly. Behind me, the shadow beings formed a circle, lending me their strength. With their help, I was able to grasp the white stone and pull it free. The gateway shuddered violently. I quickly placed the black stone where the white one had been. The two stones didn't belong in each other's worlds. They needed to be returned to restore balance. The vortex began to shrink, the light dimming. Through the narrowing opening, I could see Heather, still fighting. The shadow walkers were being pulled back toward the gateway, sucked in as it collapsed. Heather, I shouted through the closing tear. I love you. I don't know if she heard me. The last thing I saw was her face, looking toward the gateway, the mirror clutched tightly in her hands. Then the gateway snapped shut, and I was alone in the shadow realm. The shadow realm was silent after the gateway closed. The glowing vortex had vanished, leaving only a dark circle on the ground where it had been. I stood alone, surrounded by the shadow beings who watched me with their featureless faces. What now? I asked, my voice sounding strange in this place, like I was talking underwater. Jenkins' shadow stepped forward. Now you help us, as promised. The shadow realm was beautiful in its own strange way. The trees looked like they were made of dark smoke. The ground rippled like water with each step. The sky above was filled with stars that moved slowly, forming and reforming patterns. First, show me your world, I said. I need to understand what's happening here. The shadow beings led me through their forest. It was laid out exactly like my world, but everything was inverted. Where our world had sunlight, theirs had darkness. Where we had solid matter, they had something like dark energy. Our world is fading, Mike's shadow explained as we walked. See the edges? I looked where he pointed. In the distance, the shadow realm seemed to be dissolving, the edges blurring, into nothing. Why? I asked. Balance, Jenkins' shadow said simply. Your world grows brighter, more solid. Ours fades in response. The cycle has happened many times before, but never this quickly. What's different this time? Your people, your lights, your cities that burn the night away. Each light in your world creates a shadow, but also diminishes the shadow realm. I began to understand. The shadow beings weren't evil. They were desperate, fighting for survival as their world literally disappeared around them. "Show me the others," I said. "The people whose shadows you've taken." They led me to a clearing where dozens of shadow forms stood, each one recognizable: Mike, Jenkins, Collins, and all the others who had lost their shadows in my world. They weren't prisoners. They moved freely, talking among themselves. "Are they aware? Do they know what's happened to them?" I asked. "They are becoming aware," Jenkins' shadow explained. "When a shadow separates from its body, it takes time to develop consciousness here. Their bodies remain in your world, empty vessels waiting to be refilled. Can they go back? Can they be reunited with their bodies?" The shadow beings looked at each other. "It has never been tried," one said. "The separation has always been permanent." I approached Mike's shadow form. "Mike, do you recognize me?" The shadow turned. "Ranger Abernathy, what is this place?" "You're in the shadow realm. Your shadow was separated from your body." Mike's shadow looked down at himself. I remember cold hands reaching for me, then nothing, just darkness, then slowly awareness. "Do you want to go back?" I asked. "To your body, to our world?" "I don't know. I feel different here, part of something larger." Mike's shadow gestured to the others. "We're all connected now. It's peaceful." I turned back to the shadow beings. "The people in my world, the ones without shadows, they're suffering. They're alive but empty. If their shadows want to return, we should find a way." The oldest shadow being, who hadn't spoken until now, moved forward. "There may be a way. The stone you brought, the black stone, it creates a connection between our worlds. A small doorway, not a great gateway." He led me to where I had placed the black stone. It sat in a circular depression in the ground, still glowing faintly. With this, we might send shadows back one by one, but the connection would remain, allowing us to visit your world without taking shadows forcibly. "A doorway, not a gateway," I said, understanding. "Controlled, balanced, yes. But to create it properly, we need the white stone as well, the one from our world that remains in yours." My heart sank. "But how?" "I'm here, and the stone is there. You must return to your world and complete the connection." The elder shadow said. "Return? How?" The shadow beings gathered around me in a circle. "We can send you back the same way the shadow walkers cross over, by folding through the spaces between, but there is a cost." "What cost?" "To travel between worlds without a gateway requires leaving part of yourself behind. The shadow walkers can do it because they exist in both worlds already. For you to cross over, you must leave your shadow here." I looked down at my shadow, the dark outline that had followed me my whole life, that had shaken with my Parkinson's tremors, that had always been part of me. "If I leave my shadow here, what happens to me?" "You will live, but differently. You will exist partially in both worlds. You will be a bridge." I thought about Heather, fighting alone back in my world, about the shadow walkers that might still be there, about all the people who needed help. "Do it," I said. "Send me back." The elder shadow nodded. "Lie down upon the stone." I lay on my back on the cold black stone. The shadow beings formed a circle around me, their hands joined. They began to sing, a strange whistling sound that reminded me of wind through winter. "Trees." My shadow began to peel away from my body, rising up like smoke. It hurt, not like a cut or a burn, but like losing a limb, a part of myself being torn away. "Remember," the elder shadow said as darkness crept into my vision. "Find the white stone, complete the connection, create the doorway." Then everything went black. I woke up in the clearing at Eagle Cliff. The swirling vortex was gone. The ground was covered in frost, trees encased in ice that was already melting in the morning sun. I sat up slowly, feeling strange and light, like I might float away. Looking down at my hands, I could see through them slightly. Not enough to be obvious, but enough to notice if you were looking carefully. And I cast no shadow, even in the bright sunlight. "Dad!" Heather ran toward me from the edge of the clearing, Joseph limping behind her. Her face was scratched, her clothes torn, but she was alive. In her hands, she still clutched the mirror with the trapped shadow walker. She threw her arms around me. "You're back." "But how?" "The gateway closed. We saw it collapse." "It's a long story," I said, hugging her tightly. "What happened here?" "When the gateway closed, all the shadow walkers got pulled back in," she explained. "It was like they were sucked into a vacuum. The people without shadows just collapsed. They're alive, but they're not waking up. They need their shadows back," I said, "and I think I know how to help them." I explained what I'd learned in the shadow realm, about the balance between worlds, about the shadows becoming conscious on the other side. "We need to find the white stone," I told them. "It was the anchor on their side of the gateway. It should have come through when the gateway collapsed." We searched the clearing. Joseph found it near the center, a smooth white stone that glowed, faintly, like it contained its own light source. "Now what?" Heather asked, handing me the stone. "Now we create a doorway, not a gateway, a balanced connection between worlds." I carried the white stone to the exact center of the hexagonal clearing. There, I dug a small hole and placed it inside. Immediately, the air above it shimmered slightly, like heat rising from pavement. "Is that it?" Heather asked. "The doorway?" "Not yet. It needs the black stone too on the other side. The Elder Shadow promised they would place it at the same spot in their world." As I stood up, a strange sensation came over me. The world seemed to shift, colors inverting briefly. For a moment I could see both worlds at once, our sunny clearing and the dark mirror version in the shadow realm. I saw the shadow beings placing the black stone in their world, right where we had placed the white one in ours. The air shimmered more intensely. A small, vertical line of darkness appeared above the white stone, like a tear in reality. It grew slowly, widening into an oval about the size of a door. Inside the oval was the shadow realm, the dark mirror of our world. And standing on the other side were the shadow beings, looking through at us. "It worked," I whispered. Jenkins' shadow stepped forward on their side, stopping at the edge of the doorway. "The connection is established, small, controlled." "Can the shadows return to their bodies now?" I asked. "If they wish to. Some may choose to stay. Over the next few days, we work to reunite shadows with their bodies. Some shadows, like Mike's, decided to return. His body woke up immediately when his shadow stepped through the doorway and rejoined him. Others chose to remain in the shadow realm, finding a peace there they hadn't known in our world. Their bodies we cared for as best we could, hoping the shadows might change their minds someday. The doorway remained, a stable connection between worlds, small enough to control, balanced enough to maintain harmony. Shadow beings could visit our world briefly, and humans could glimpse theirs, but neither side could overwhelm the other. My condition remained unchanged. I cast no shadow, and sometimes I could see both worlds at once. My Parkinson's tremors never returned. That part of me had stayed with my shadow in the other world. Heather helped me adjust to my new existence. "You're the bridge," she would say. "Half here, half there." The park slowly returned to normal as fall turned to winter. We explained the missing people and the strange events as the effects of a sudden, localized cold front. Most people accepted this explanation, their minds unable or unwilling to consider the truth. Joseph became the caretaker of the doorway, teaching others the old knowledge about the shadow realm. Together, we established rules and boundaries for crossing between worlds, ensuring balance would be maintained. The mirror with the trapped shadow walker remained in my possession. We never released it, keeping it as a reminder of what could happen when balance was broken. Sometimes at night, I would sit by the doorway and look through to the shadow realm. I could see my own shadow there, living its own life now, part of that world as I was part of this one. In those quiet moments, with stars overhead and two worlds before me, I finally understood what my grandfather had discovered all those years ago. Our worlds were never meant to be separate. They were two halves of the same reality, each needing the other to exist. Balance was all that mattered. Light and shadow, day and night, life and whatever waited on the other side, and I would stand guard at the boundary between them for as long as I could, a man without a shadow, watching over the long shadows that connected our worlds. My name is Robert Finch, and I've been a ranger in these Smoky Mountains for nearly 30 years now. Folks around here call me the best tracker in the service, though at 52, my knees don't always agree. These mountains have been my home since I came back from the war. After losing my Helen to TB 10 years back, it's just been me and these woods. April 1958 started like any other spring in the mountains. The dogwoods were blooming, and I was doing my usual patrol along the western ridge. That's when I noticed something odd about the oak trees near Blackwater Creek. Their trunks seemed wider than when I'd passed through just a week before. I've spent my life in these woods, so I know when something's not right. I pulled out my pocket knife and took a small core sample from one of the trees. What I saw made me drop the sample in shock. The rings showed growth that should have taken decades, not days. I picked it up again, counting carefully. This tree had grown what looked like 30 years' worth of rings in a single season. That's not possible, I muttered to myself, the spring breeze carrying my words away. When I got back to my cabin that evening, I wrote everything down in my logbook. Over the next few days, I kept seeing more strange things. A patch of mountain, laurel that moved when no wind was blowing, animal tracks that stopped suddenly, as if the creatures had simply vanished. And most troubling, I hadn't seen a single deer on the western ridge, though they should have been everywhere this time of year. A week later, I found an old hunter's cabin I'd never seen before, tucked away in a hollow that I could have sworn was empty last season. The inside walls were covered with strange symbols carved deep into the wood, spirals and eyes and things that looked like twisted trees with faces. In a dusty corner, I found a journal dated 1898. The handwriting was faded, but I could make out descriptions of trees that grow overnight and forests that listen. The last entry simply read, "It's awake now. God help us all." I tucked the journal into my pack and headed back to my cabin. That night, I dreamed of trees with roots that reached out like fingers, pulling themselves across the forest floor. The next morning brought news that Bright Future Development Company had started surveying for a new resort on the western ridge. My boss, Chief Ranger Sullivan, called me into his office to discuss it. They're talking about a 100-room hotel, Finch. Golf course, swimming pools, the works, Sullivan said, spreading blueprints across his desk. Right where those old Cherokee burial grounds are supposed to be, I replied. Sullivan nodded. That's why I want you working with them. Make sure they don't disturb anything they shouldn't. I met the survey team at the trailhead the next day. Their leader, a city fellow named Richard Harmon, didn't seem too interested in my warnings about respecting the land. "We've got permits for everything, Ranger," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "This resort is happening whether the trees like it or not. By the end of the week, they'd cleared a small area for test drilling. That same night, I got a call on my radio. One of the workers had found human remains, old ones, with tree roots grown through them in a spiral pattern I recognized from the symbols in that hunter's cabin. When I arrived at the site, the bones had been carefully laid out. The skull was split open, not from injury, but from a small sapling that had grown right through it, the roots wrapped around the ribcage in a perfect spiral. "I've never seen anything like this," said the young archaeologist. They'd brought in, "It's as if the tree deliberately grew through the remains." That night, as I walked back to my cabin, I could have sworn I heard the trees creaking in rhythm like they were talking to each other. The plants near the excavation site had died and regrown overnight, their new leaves oddly shaped and slightly luminous in the moonlight. Something was happening in my forest, something I didn't understand. But whatever it was, it had happened before, back in 1898, and I had a feeling it was just beginning. The next morning, I decided to visit Daniel Walkingstick, an old Cherokee friend who knew more about these mountains than anyone. Daniel lived in a small house at the edge of the reservation, surrounded by a garden of traditional healing plants. "I've been expecting you, Robert," he said when he opened his door. He didn't seem surprised at all, like he'd known I was coming. Before I did, we sat on his porch, drinking strong coffee, while I told him about the strange growth patterns, the remains, and the old journal. "The one who grows through men," Daniel said quietly when I finished. "That's what my grandfather called it, an ancient spirit that protects the forest." "What exactly is it?" I asked, feeling a chill despite the warm spring sun. Daniel sighed. "Not something. Many things that become one. The trees, the plants, the soil, they're all parts of it. It sleeps for generations. But when the forest is threatened, it wakes up." "You're saying the forest itself is alive? Like one big creature? More alive than you know?" Daniel nodded. "The last time it woke was in 1898, when they tried to build that big logging operation. 60 years before that, it was when settlers tried to clear the western ridge. The company woke it up again when they started digging where they shouldn't. I showed him the journal I'd found." Daniel's fingers traced the symbols on the pages. "These are warnings," he said. "This spiral pattern means the growing one. This one means the forest walks. My people stayed away from the western ridge during these times." As I drove back to headquarters, the radio crackled to life. One of the survey team was missing. I changed direction and headed straight to the development site. By the time I arrived, they'd found him. But what I saw made my blood run cold. Surveyor was embedded in the trunk of a massive oak tree that hadn't been there the day before. He was alive somehow, his eyes open and moving. But the tree had grown around him, through him. His skin had a greenish tint, and tiny leaves were sprouting from his fingertips. "Get an ambulance!" Harmon was shouting, but I knew no hospital could help this man. I radioed for Paul Matheson, a young ranger who'd been helping me document the strange happenings. Together, we tried to cut the man free, but the wood seemed to grow back as fast as we could cut it. "Finch," the surveyor whispered when I got close. "It showed me things. The whole forest. Connected. It's angry." Those were his last words. By sundown, he had become part of the tree completely. That night, I couldn't sleep. I spread all my notes and the old journal across my kitchen table. I found records from the 1898 incident. Notes from Ranger James Cooper describing the same patterns I was seeing: rapid growth, animals fleeing, people becoming part of the trees. The next morning, I took Matheson to check the Western Ridge Trail. The forest had changed overnight. Trees that had stood apart were now growing together, their branches weaving into walls that blocked certain paths. "Look at the canopy," Matheson pointed up. The treetops were bending toward each other, forming what looked like a huge dome over the ridge. As we walked back, I noticed I could feel the forest in a way I never had before. I knew where animals were hiding without seeing them. I could sense which paths were safe and which weren't. "I think it's trying to talk to us," I told Matheson, or at least to me. The development company brought in more equipment the next day, bulldozers and backhoes, to clear land for the resort's foundation. As the first bulldozer started pushing down trees, every bird in the forest took flight at once, darkening the sky for a moment. That evening, I found plants growing around my cabin that had never been seen in this part of the country. Some glowed faintly in the dark. Others moved their leaves to follow my movements. When I touched one, it released a scent that gave me vivid dreams of walking through the forest from high above, as if I were flying. I was beginning to understand that whatever was happening wasn't just strange, it was dangerous. The forest was fighting back, and the company was poking a bear they didn't even know existed. I tried warning Harmon, but he just laughed. "Trees don't fight back, Ranger Finch," he said. "And we've got too much money invested to worry about some local superstition." If only he had listened. Because that night the forest showed just how wrong he was. Matheson didn't show up for work the next morning. I tried his radio several times with no answer. By noon, I had a bad feeling in my gut that wouldn't go away. "I'm going to look for Paul," I told Sullivan. "He was supposed to check the northern section of the ridge last night." Sullivan nodded, worry lines creasing his forehead. "Take Jenkins with you. And Finch, be careful out there." Jenkins and I followed Matheson's usual patrol route. Everything seemed normal until we reached Widow's Creek. There, blocking our path, stood a wall of trees that hadn't been there the day before. Trees grown so close together you couldn't squeeze between them. "This is impossible," Jenkins whispered. "These trees would take 50 years to grow this size." I touched one of the trunks. It felt warm, like skin. "We need to go around." As we circled the strange wall of trees, I spotted something moving in the underbrush. Not an animal. It was too jerky, too deliberate. I motioned for Jenkins to freeze. From behind a fallen log emerged what looked like a man-shaped collection of twigs and leaves, no bigger than a child. It moved in quick, bird-like motions, its body constantly shifting and rebuilding itself. Jenkins raised his rifle, but I pushed it down. "Don't," I whispered. "Just watch." The twig creature tilted what passed for its head, studying us. Then another appeared beside it, and another. Soon, a dozen of these things surrounded us, swaying slightly, as if in a breeze, though the air was still. "Back away slowly," I told Jenkins. The creatures made no move to follow as we retreated. We found Matheson's radio and flashlight on the path beyond the wall of trees, but no sign of him. As the sun began to set, we had to head back to headquarters. That night, lightning lit up the sky, though there was no rain. I stood on my cabin porch, watching it strike repeatedly around the western ridge. Something told me I needed to be there. Right at that moment, I grabbed my old Colt revolver, the one with notches on the handle from times it had saved my life, and drove as close as I could to the ridge. The forest felt different in the dark, alive in a way it never had before. The ground pulsed beneath my boots like a giant heartbeat. The lightning led me to an ancient oak that must have been standing since before the first settlers came. As I approached, I saw Matheson. He was half embedded in the trunk, still conscious, eyes wide with wonder rather than fear. "Finch," he said when he saw me. His voice sounded strange, like multiple voices speaking at once. "It's beautiful. I can feel everything, every tree, every plant, every creature." "Paul," I said, reaching for him. "Let me help you." He shook his head. "Too late for that. I'm becoming part of it now. It chose me to help it speak." "Speak to who?" "To you," he said. "And through you, to them, the destroyers." Before I could ask what he meant, the lightning struck again, hitting the great oak. The flash blinded me, and when my vision cleared, I saw it. Rising from behind the tree was a massive shape, taller than a house, and roughly human in form, but made entirely of branches, vines, leaves, and earth. It moved with a terrible grace, each step causing the ground to shake. Where its face should have been was a hollow with two glowing points of green light, like eyes. I should have run. Any sane person would have. But I stood my ground, hand on my revolver, though I knew bullets would do nothing against this thing. The entity, the woodborne, as I would come to call it, bent down to examine me. A sound like wind through 1,000 trees filled my head, almost. Forming words I couldn't quite understand, Matheson spoke again, his voice still that strange chorus. "It knows you, Robert Finch. It has watched you for 30 years. You respect the forest. You understand balance." "What does it want?" I managed to ask, my mouth dry as dust. "To survive," Matheson said. "The men who dig and cut threaten its home, its body. It will defend itself." As if summoned by his words, I heard engines approaching, the development company's security team led by Harmon himself. They'd seen the lightning and came to investigate. The woodborne straightened to its full height as headlights cut through the trees. I stood between the creature and the approaching men, knowing I had to prevent what was about to happen. "Stop!" I shouted as Harmon and 5 armed men emerged from the vehicles. "Turn around now!" But Harmon just stared past me, his face pale. In the moonlight, "What the hell is that thing?" One of the guards raised his shotgun. I lunged for him, but I was too late. The blast hit the woodborne, tearing away chunks of its body that instantly regrew. The creature made no sound, but the entire forest seemed to scream. Every tree around us suddenly bent toward the men, branches shooting out like spears. 2 guards went down immediately, impaled by wooden spikes that erupted from the ground. Harmon and the others scrambled back to their vehicles, but vines erupted from the earth, wrapping around the tires. "Run!" I shouted at them. "Into the clearing!" As they fled, the woodborne turned its gaze on me. A cascade of falling leaves swirled. Between us, forming patterns I somehow understood. Question, curiosity, recognition. I stood my ground, staring up at those green eyes. "I want to understand," I said. "I want to help stop this before more people get hurt." The entity regarded me for a long moment. Then slowly, it extended what might have been a hand, a mass of intertwined branches and vines. Without thinking, I reached out and touched it. In that moment, my mind exploded with images: ancient forests, the slow growth of trees over centuries, the interconnected root systems spreading for miles, the constant communication between plants, through chemicals and fungi. I felt the pain of clear cutting, the scorching agony of forest fires, the slow poisoning of pollution. I fell to my knees, overwhelmed by the connection. When I looked up again, the woodborne was gone, dissolved back into the forest. But I knew it was still there, watching, waiting, and I knew that what had just happened was only the beginning. The next morning, I woke to find my cabin had changed. The wooden walls seemed to breathe slightly, expanding and contracting with my own breath. When I placed my hand on the windowsill, the grain of the wood shifted beneath my fingers, swirling into those same spiral patterns I'd seen everywhere. "You're trying to talk to me," I whispered. "I just don't know how to listen yet." After what happened on the ridge, Sullivan had called in state police and Forest Service officials. They'd found the bodies of the 2 guards, but Matheson was now completely gone. The tree where I'd last seen him had vanished too. No one believed my story about a giant creature made of forest parts. They blamed wild animals and some kind of mass hallucination from unknown plants. Only Harmon knew the truth. I found him at the development company's trailer, staring at the woods with bloodshot eyes. "You saw it too," I said. He nodded slowly. "What was that thing, Finch?" "Something old, something that protects the forest." I hesitated, then added, "Something. You woke up when you started digging." Harmon rubbed his face. "3 of my men are dead. The equipment is destroyed. Head office is sending more security, ex-military guys with flamethrowers and heavy equipment." My blood ran cold. "Flamethrowers? You can't burn it out, Harmon. You'll just make it angrier." "What choice do I have?" he snapped. "Millions of dollars are riding on this project. My career is on the line. Your life is on the line," I told him. "Everyone's lives are. We need to talk to it, not fight it." Harmon laughed, a harsh sound with no humor in it. "Talk to a pile of walking sticks? You've gone crazy, old man." Maybe I had. But that night I went back to the Western Ridge alone. I brought the journal from 1898, my notes, and a hunch about how to make contact. The forest was alive with sound and movement as I hiked up to the spot where I'd seen the woodborne. Small twig creatures followed me, keeping just out of clear sight. The trees seemed to bend to make a path for me. In a small clearing, I stopped and took out my knife. I cut my palm and let a few drops of blood fall onto the ground. "I'm here," I said. "I want to understand. I want to help." For a long time, nothing happened. Then the ground beneath my feet shifted. Plants grew up around my boots, not to trap me, but forming patterns. I recognized them as a simple map of the ridge, with different colored flowers marking specific locations. "You're showing me something," I said, studying the pattern. "Places that matter to you." The flowers shifted in response, some growing taller. I realized they were marking the boundaries of what the entity considered its domain. The development project sat right in the center of it. Over the next few hours, I sat in that clearing as the forest communicated through growing plants, falling leaves, and the movement of small creatures. I began to piece together understanding. The woodborne wasn't a single creature, but a collective consciousness. The entire forest acting as one organism when threatened. It awoke in cycles tied to the moon, but only when something disturbed its core areas. The spiral patterns were its signature, its way of marking where its influence was strongest. Most importantly, I learned it didn't want to kill. It wanted balance. The men who died had attacked first. It was defending itself. When I returned to my cabin at dawn, I found Daniel Walkingstick waiting on my porch. "You've spoken with it," he said. It wasn't a question. I nodded, showing him my notes. "It's trying to protect specific areas, old growth forest, water sources, and this central zone, where they want to build the resort." Daniel examined my crude map. "Sacred ground, burial sites, places of power." He looked up at me. "You're changing, Robert. I can see it in your eyes." I knew he was right. Since touching the woodborne, I could feel the forest constantly, like a low hum in my mind. I could sense where animals were without seeing them. Plants responded to my touch, growing faster, leaning toward me. "What's happening to me?" I asked. "You're becoming a bridge," Daniel said simply. "It happens sometimes, a human who can speak for the forest. My great-grandfather was one." Before I could ask more, my radio crackled. Sullivan's voice came through, tense and urgent. "Finch, get to the development site now. Harmon's security team has arrived, and they're talking about burning out a section of the ridge." By the time I arrived, it was already too late. A line of men in protective gear was moving into the forest with flamethrowers, setting fire to the undergrowth. The smell of burning wood and leaves filled the air. "Stop!" I shouted, running toward Harmon, who was directing the operation. "You're making a terrible mistake." He ignored me, pointing to a dense section of trees. "Burn that area next." The forest's response was immediate and terrifying. The ground erupted as thick roots shot upward, wrapping around men's legs. Trees bent and swung their branches like arms, knocking down the security team. Leaves and twigs swirled into humanoid shapes that attacked the flamethrowers. In the chaos, I saw Harmon grabbed by what looked like a mass of vines. They dragged him toward the tree line as he screamed for help. Without thinking, I ran after him. "Stop!" I yelled, not to Harmon, but to the forest. "This isn't the way." The vines paused, Harmon suspended in their grip. Behind him, rising from the trees, the woodborne formed again, towering over us both. I stood between them, hands raised. "There's another way. Let me show you both." The massive entity tilted its head, those green eyes studying me. Then, slowly, it lowered Harmon to the ground. The man collapsed, gasping, his skin already showing the first signs of small leaves growing from his pores. "What's happening to me?" he whispered, looking at his hands in horror. "It's changing you," I said. "Making you part of itself so you can understand." Around us, The fires were dying out as the forest smothered them with dirt and new growth. The security team had fled or been captured by the moving trees. It was just the three of us now, me, Harmon, and the ancient entity that controlled everything around us. It wants to show us something, I told Harmon, helping him to his feet. And I think we need to follow. The woodborne turned and moved deeper into the forest, its body shifting and reforming with each step. We followed, me supporting Harmon, who grew weaker as the transformation progressed. "Why didn't it take you too?" he asked between labored breaths. I touched the notched handle of my revolver, a habit from my war days. I think it recognizes something. In me, something that's already connected to life and death. As we walked, I realized the woodborne was leading us to what would become the heart of understanding and the beginning of the end of this strange, terrifying awakening. The woodborne led us deep into the forest, to a clearing I'd never seen before. In the center stood a massive oak tree that must have been hundreds of years old. Its trunk was wider than three men, standing with arms outstretched, and its branches created a ceiling of leaves overhead. Harmon collapsed at the base of the tree, his breathing shallow. The leaves growing from his skin were spreading and tiny. Branches had begun to emerge from his forearms. His eyes had turned a deep green. "What's happening?" he whispered. "You're becoming its voice," I said, kneeling beside him. Like Matheson was. The woodborne stood at the edge of the clearing, watching us. Around its feet, those small twig creatures gathered, their stick bodies swaying in perfect unison. "I can hear it," Harmon said suddenly. "In my head. So many voices, all at once." He grabbed my wrist with surprising strength. "It's showing me things, Finch. The forest, it's like one giant living thing, all connected, and we've been cutting into it like it's nothing." I nodded. "That's what it's been trying to tell us." Harmon's eyes grew wide. The resort would have destroyed everything, not just trees, but a whole system that's been alive for thousands of years. He took a shuddering breath. "It's willing to compromise. It needs certain areas left untouched. The old growth sections, the water sources, the burial grounds. Everything else, it can adapt." I looked up at the woodborne. "Is that true? You'll let the development continue if they avoid the sacred areas?" The entity didn't speak, but leaves fell around us in that spiral pattern I now recognized as its signature. I understood it as agreement. "I need to tell Sullivan," I said, standing. "I need to make them understand what's happening here." Harmon grabbed my pant leg. "There's more. It needs a guardian, someone who understands both worlds." His eyes locked with mine. "It wants you, Finch." Before I could answer, the sound of vehicles and shouting voices reached us. Sullivan had organized a search party, and they were getting close. "Go," Harmon said. "I'll stay here. I'm already part of it now." His voice was changing, becoming that same chorus I'd heard from Matheson. "But bring Daniel Walkingstick. He knows the ritual that will make you the guardian." I hesitated, then nodded. "I'll be back." As I left the clearing, I saw Harmon being drawn into the great oak, his body merging with the bark. The sight should have terrified me, but somehow it felt right, like watching someone go home. I met the search party halfway down the mountain. Sullivan looked relieved to see me. "Finch, where the hell have you been? Where's Harmon?" "It's complicated," I said, "but I know how to stop what's happening. I need to talk to the company executives, and I need Daniel Walkingstick." Over the next few days, I became a mediator between two worlds. With Daniel's help, I explained to the company what they were dealing with, not as a supernatural threat, but as an ancient ecological system defending itself. I showed them my maps of the sacred areas, explaining that development had to avoid those spots. At first, they didn't believe me. Then I took them to see Harmon, now half emerged from the great oak, still conscious, still able to speak in that strange chorus voice. Seeing their boss partly turned into a tree convinced them in a way nothing else could have. A week later, they agreed to a new plan, a smaller resort built away from the sacred areas with strict rules about preserving the old-growth forest. It'll still be profitable, the new project manager assured me, just different than we planned. With the immediate threat resolved, I returned to the Great Oak to fulfill the second part of the agreement. Daniel came with me, carrying a small bag of ceremonial items. "Are you sure about this, Robert?" he asked as we walked. "Once it's done, you can never go back to being just a man." I'd thought about my lonely cabin, about 30 years of walking these woods, about Helen long gone and no children to leave behind. "I'm sure. This forest has been my real home all along." The ritual was simple, but profound. Daniel mixed my blood with sap from the great oak and water from the spring nearby. He painted symbols on my face and chest, the same spiral patterns the forest used. He spoke words in Cherokee that I somehow understood, though I'd never learned the language. As the sun set, the woodborne appeared one last time, its massive form silhouetted against the twilight sky. It reached out one branch hand toward me. This time when I took it, the connection was permanent. I felt my consciousness expand, flowing outward through roots and branches, feeling every leaf and twig as if they were my own fingers. I could sense animals moving through underbrush miles away. I could feel water flowing underground, the slow growth of fungus networks connecting everything together. The transformation wasn't painful. It felt like finally becoming what I was always meant to be. My feet grew roots that dug into the soil. My skin hardened into bark. My hair became leaves that could sense the slightest change in air pressure. I was still myself, still Robert Finch, but I was more now, much more. 5 years have passed since that spring when the forest woke up. The resort opened last year, a modest collection of cabins that blend with the trees rather than replacing them. Visitors come to hike and learn about forest preservation. They're told to respect certain boundaries, marked by trees growing in perfect circles. My physical body doesn't move much anymore. It's rooted beside the great oak, slowly becoming more tree than man. Rangers who knew me leave small offerings sometimes, a tobacco pouch, a cup of coffee, a book of poetry. They think I can't enjoy these things anymore, but they're wrong. I experience them differently now, through scent and the memory of what it was to be fully human. My mind can travel anywhere the forest reaches. I follow deer as they migrate across the mountains. I experience the joy of saplings stretching towards sunlight. I watch over the campgrounds, keeping hikers safe, leading lost children back to trails with carefully arranged patterns of flowers or the strategic placement of friendly animals. I've trained the new rangers to recognize warning signs, spiral, patterns in tree rings, sudden growth, animals moving in unison. They know which areas must remain untouched, which ceremonies must be performed each spring. Sometimes at night, I allow my consciousness to form a body of branches and leaves, walking the ridge the way I used to in my human form. The locals have stories now about the spirit that protects these woods. A tall figure seen through trees at twilight, with glowing green eyes and a body made of the forest itself. They call it the Ridge Walker. They don't know it's me, or what's left of me, but that's all right. Some mysteries are better left unexplained. What matters is that the forest lives, and I live with it. The ancient balance is maintained. And when I feel the first stirrings of another resort being planned, another road being cut, well, the forest knows how to protect itself now, and I know how to guide it.